Chapter 934. Once the outermost layer of Xian Qi protection was broken, everything else would be easy. Qiu Mengxing only felt a sharp pain in his chest as the long spear pierced through his chest and came out. The long spear that was originally bent into a bow was released and instantly bounced back. The spear that was more than 100 feet long, in the midst of Qiu Mengxing's miserable howl, pierced through his body. It was probably because this unforeseen event happened too suddenly. Although Qiu Mengxing was hit by the spear, he still could not stop the majestic momentum of falling from the sky. He still bared his fangs and brandished his claws as he pounced towards the 4 people on the top of the mountain. This series of unforeseen events, although it took a long time to describe, actually only happened in an instant. Qiu Mengxing came, carrying with it the might of wind and thunder. The thunderbolt fell like the end of the world. Then, as if it had appeared out of nowhere, a flower of blood suddenly burst out of his chest. Pierced through from front to back. Then, he continued to fall, accompanied by the flow of blood splattered across the sky. However, strange things happened one after another today. After the spear pierced through his body, the strange long spear that was still embedded in Qiu Mengxing's body suddenly disappeared. It disappeared directly from his chest. The direct result of the sudden disappearance of the long spear was that a round hole suddenly appeared in his chest. From the angle of the 4 people on the top of the mountain, they could see the sun through his chest. This scene was truly horrifying to the extreme. The majestic Qiu Mengxing, in an instant, let out a long scream. In the midst of the scream, his whole body rushed down. Just like before, he faced the 2 swords and sabers of the 4 people who jumped up. However, at this time, their conditions were completely different from before. Qiu Mengxing's protective Xian Qi had been broken, and he was also seriously injured. Qiu Mengxing, who had suddenly suffered a fatal blow, could only feel that his internal organs were burning crazily. It was an unbearable feeling of being on the verge of death. He could feel his life force rapidly leaving his body, the despair that was about to reach the bottom, and the pain of the wound on his chest coming into close contact with the whistling gale. All of these made him feel pain in his heart, so much that he wanted to die. He could even feel the strong wind brought about by the rapid fall blowing his internal organs out piece by piece. His vision had already begun to blur, and his fighting instincts had also been extinguished. Even his consciousness was blurred. He did not even have the time to react, and the 2 swords and sabers slashed at him at the same time. It was not until more blood spurted out that he finally came to his senses and roared as if he had just woken up from a dream. He grabbed a sword and a saber in each of his hands. However, there was nothing he could do about the other saber and sword. The divine edge in Yun Yang's hand was imbued with mystical qi as it slashed at Qiu Mengxing's left shoulder. With a clang, the left shoulder and the left hand had already been chopped off. Shi Wuchen's sword pierced the right side of Qiu Mengxing's chest. Sword qi gushed in and exploded like a bomb in Qiu Mengxing's chest. Qiu Mengxing howled in despair. His body trembled and blood kept gushing out of his mouth. His internal organs, which were still intact, were all crushed by the sword qi. His hands, which were originally holding onto the saber and the sword, unconsciously loosened their grip. Lan Ruojuan's saber regained its freedom. With a casual slash, Qiu Mengxing's entire right shoulder was chopped off. Ren Qinghuang swung his sword in a circle like a large saber and swung it horizontally, chopping off Qiu Mengxing's head. This Saint Level 3 pinnacle expert had only shown his face once. He had come with an overbearing aura, but he had been chopped into pieces in the blink of an eye, dying without a complete corpse. Even until his head was separated from his body and he breathed his last, his body had not even landed on the ground. He was still hovering in the air. Everything had been settled in that instant. The eyes of Qiu Mengxing's decapitated head were still filled with disbelief, shock, and fear. Even in death, he still could not understand what had happened. How could there be such a spear in the air? With a wave of his hand, Yun Yang grabbed Qiu Mengxing's left arm. With a swipe of his hand, the spatial ring had changed hands. A Saint Level 3 expert's net worth must be quite high. Even Yan Guo would pluck his feathers, How could the raiders of all but God leave empty-handed this time? Time was running out. The sound of wind and thunder was approaching from afar. Go! With Yun Yang's shout, the other three did not even have time to sheath their weapons as they turned around in the air. Shi Wuchen grabbed the back of Yun Yang's robe and flew with his cultivation base. Lan Ruojuan and Ren Qinghuang did not have time to catch their breaths either. Each of them grabbed one of Shi Wuchen's legs and flew with him. The three of them caught their breaths at the same time and exerted their strength at the same time. The massive force began to push Yun Yang forward. Yun Yang took the opportunity to inhale a deep breath of energy and flew with all his might, bringing the other three with him. In an instant, the four of them were already in a line, but they had all caught their breaths. With a whoosh, they sped through the air and disappeared in a flash. Behind them, the dozen or so figures brought with them a powerful pressure that was as heavy as a mountain. They had arrived at Swallow's Hill just a step behind Qiu Mingqing, but they were still a step too late. They could only see Qiu Mingqing's dismembered corpse, which had died with everlasting regret. Seeing Qiu Mingqing's death, the newcomers could not help but suck in a cold breath, trembling with fear. Qiu Mingqing, Emerald Cloud School's guardian. A Saint Level 3 pinnacle expert. How did he die here in such a short amount of time, and in such a miserable way? We only caught a glimpse of him just now, but we clearly saw him take the lead and come right after him. The difference between them was at most half a breath's time. Such a short period of time, at most, it was the time it took for him to exchange a single blow. How could Qiu Mingqing die so easily? Although the other party had the advantage in numbers, it shouldn't have happened this way. The more I think about it, the stranger it seems. Could it be that one of these four people from the Raiders of All but God has the ability to kill a Saint Level 3 in an instant? This is impossible, right? It's definitely impossible. Otherwise, why would they run? Let's not jump to conclusions and don't touch the scene. Let's first investigate how Qiu Mingqing died. That's the priority right now. These people had rushed over at full speed. Although Qiu Mingqing was a step ahead of them, they were not in a hurry. They were all experienced martial artists, so they knew what was going on. Although Qiu Mingqing was fast, the three people from the Raiders of All but God were not easy to deal with. Even a Saint Level 3 pinnacle would not be able to take them down in an instant. It's fine that Qiu Mingqing came first. It's not a bad idea to hold back the Raiders of All but God for us. When we get here, everything will be ours. We can also wear down the Raiders of All but God's spirit. However, they did not expect that Qiu Mingqing was already dead just because they were a step too late. He came with an insufferably arrogant attitude, but he died without hesitation. What the F***ck? Chapter 935. The dozen or so experts circled Qiu Mingqing's corpse a dozen times, but all of them were dumbfounded and confused. They really could not tell. How did this old man die? It looked like all the injuries were inflicted at the same time. At most, he was beheaded before his limbs were severed, or his limbs were severed before his head was severed. At most, there was the possibility of a heavily injured body, something still not right. Unless Qiu Mingqing was tired of living and came all the way here to seek his death. All the signs of death and injuries point to one thing. This fellow didn't even show any signs of resistance from the beginning to the end. No matter how I look at it, this fellow doesn't look like he's here for revenge. He looks more like he's here to commit suicide. This explanation sounded ridiculous to the extreme, but everyone present felt that this was the only explanation that could explain the situation in front of them. This is strange. It's strange indeed. It's inexplicable. The four of them dashed into the cave that they had found earlier like a whirlwind. Yin Yang was the last. Just as the four of them landed, the force of earth and wood was activated simultaneously. Clumps of soil fell from the top of the cave, and the soil underneath the cave was uprooted at the same time. Countless vines and flowers grew at an abnormal speed. In the blink of an eye, they had completely covered the entrance of the cave. Looking from the outside, even if one were to stick directly to the wall, they would not be able to see anything out of the ordinary. They would never have thought that there would be a hidden cave here. Huff, 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 inside the cave. The 4 people who had sprinted with all their might fell to the ground, panting heavily. Each of them was so exhausted that they were almost suffocating. In the previous battle, Qiu Mengxing had been gravely injured due to his carelessness. Both his combat power and fighting will had been extinguished, resulting in a successful strike. However, what Yun Yang and the others were facing was Qiu Mengxing's Saint Level 3 defensive mystical qi and his almost indestructible physical body. All 4 of them had given it their all at that moment. Although it had only been a blink of an eye, the 4 of them had already exerted the ultimate ability that surpassed their limits. Coupled with the exhaustion from escaping at top speed just now, the fatigue he felt right now was as if his body had been completely drained. However, all 4 of them were filled with excitement. 3rd level saint. They were almost equivalent to the core figures of lower-class celestial luck banners. Even if he wasn't a sect leader, he would at least be a powerhouse at the elder level. Among the last few sects with black celestial luck banners, the highest cultivation base was only a 4th level saint. To Yun Yang and the other 3, killing Qiu Mengxing in one fell swoop was not as satisfying as the exhilaration. Although we used a trick to trick Qiu Mengxing, it also proves that as long as we work hard and move forward, with our current strength, we still have a chance to enter the ranks of lower-class celestial luck banners. Shi Wuchen's face was sallow from exhaustion, but he was extremely excited. "Boss, do you have any plans?" Yun Yang breathed in slowly, calming his heart that was beating like a drum. He said in a low voice, "Of course there is, but we are still far from having enough manpower. We have a long way to go." Shi Wuchen and Lan Ruojuan nodded at the same time. The Battle of Celestial Luck was an open and above-board battle that required 3 battles. This included the battle of the sect's highest combat strength, followed by the battle of the sect leaders of both sides, and the last battle would be the battle of the elite lineups of both sides. The specific number of people in the battle would be suggested by the defending side. The previous battle between the highest combat strength and the sect leader was basically one battle for many sections. If it was forcibly divided into 2 battles, it would probably be the first and second experts of the 2 sects taking turns to fight. As for the 3rd battle, it was the most difficult test for the residents of 9 Supremes. There were only 4 combatants in the residence of 9 Supremes now. If they really went to challenge them, once the opponent suggested a battle of 9 people, they would not even need to fight. They wouldn't even need to fight each other. They would be directly eliminated due to a lack of people. We have to think of a way quickly. Why don't we get the other brothers here? Shi Wuchen said excitedly. Lan Ruojuan rolled his eyes and said, "Yi Tua, you're the only one who can do this." Shi Wuchen was furious. "I'll cut all ties with you if you call me Yi Tua again." Yin Yang and Ren Xingguang laughed soundlessly, tears almost falling from their eyes. Due to Shi Wuchen's surname and the fact that Ren Xingguang and Lan Ruojuan had long since become the residents of 9 Supreme's 2nd Supreme, the 2 of them did not have any titles at all. In their envy and jealousy, Shi Wuchen was extremely displeased and had conveniently given him the nickname Yi Tua. Shi Wuchen had already lost his temper a few times over this matter, but to no avail. After all, he was alone. Just Lan Ruojuan and Ren Xingguang taking turns to fight him was already too much for him to handle. Yin Yang, on the other hand, seemed to be very keen on this new nickname as well. Shi Wuchen liked to curl up in his sleep. Once he curled up into a strange shape, it really looked like, "Sigh, we're all brothers. It's just a name, why get so angry?" Yin Yang advised, "Yi Tua, honestly, you have to put in more effort in this matter. Our strength is still very weak now. We need manpower urgently." Shi Wuchen was extremely upset. "Boss, you're calling me that too. It hurts my heart," Yin Yang said with a straight face. "Why do you care about these small details?" Yi Tua. Shi Wuchen lay sprawled on the ground, moaning, "I need allies. I need allies desperately." The 3 of them laughed. "Let's take this break to count our gains this time. It seems like we've robbed quite a lot of things this time. It's a small gain. The four of them counted the items they had robbed, reported the number, and summed it up. Yin Yang concluded that Yun Yang was first, Ren Xingguang second, Shi Wuchen third, and Lan Ruojuan last. The number of upper-class spiritual jade pieces we've collected is too little, less than 1,000, 20,000 mid-class spiritual jade pieces, and 3 million lower-class spiritual jade pieces. As for the various treasures of heaven and earth, there are only a few of them. There are all sorts of exotic metals, less than 10 pieces in total. Yin Yang was very dissatisfied with the loot. Even if we include the miscellaneous items like weapons and other things, there's not much in total. What can we do with such a small amount of loot? Boss, you haven't seen Xiao Mingqing's ring, have you? Shi Wuchen reminded. Chapter 936. Is that so? Shi Wuchen and the other two were dumbfounded. They were deeply impressed by Xiao Mingqing's hobby. There were all sorts of weirdos in this world. There was nothing that did not exist as long as one could not imagine it. No wonder he's still a third-level saint. Lan Ruojuan snorted. It's not without reason. Lan Ruojuan snorted. It's not like he didn't die in the first place. Yin Yang could not help but sigh at this. He had high hopes for this third-level saint spatial ring, but now it seemed that other than its slightly larger contents, his net worth was not even comparable to most people's. It was a huge disappointment. Part of the reason he had taken the risk to come up with this ambush plan was because of this ring. But now, it seemed that the things in the ring weren't worth the risk. Moreover, this battle would definitely create a death feud with the Emerald Cloud sect. Yin Yang felt that this was the worst decision he had made since ascending to the bound of universe. A moment of greed would have dire consequences. Yin Yang immediately reminded himself that he must not be greedy in the future. Knowing when to quit while one was ahead was one of his rules of conduct. Otherwise, if Xiao Mingqing's incident happened a few more times, it would bring disaster to the residents of Nine Supremes sooner or later. I'll take this as a warning. Yin Yang made up his mind. Dispose of the stolen goods first. Then consolidate the combat experience from these few days. Use medicinal pills and heaven and earth treasures along with the ethereal amethysts to improve as much as you can. Increase your ability to the maximum. Go back to the sect first. I'll go do business. Yin Yang laughed and disappeared from where he stood. Boss's power is so enviable. Lan Ruojuan watched Yin Yang disappear with admiration. If it wasn't for Boss's power, I'm afraid we would've. The residents of Nine Supremes' name will shake the world. Ren Xingguang's eyes were filled with passion. Lan Ruojuan and Shi Wuchen were filled with the same passion as Ren Xingguang when they suddenly saw hope after being oppressed for so long. Back to the sect. Shi Wuchen patted his buttocks and stood up. Remember to change your clothes and dress up. Don't bring the raiders of all but God's name to our honorable sect. The residents of Nine Supremes is a righteous sect, and everyone here is a righteous man and gentleman. Both Lan Ruojuan and Lan Ruojuan were exasperated. The construction of the sect is almost complete. I'll follow Boss's instructions and activate the Great Mountain Barrier Formation. I'll let you two country bumpkins have a taste of the benefits of a sect. Shi Wuchen laughed heartily, his eyes filled with longing. Let's discuss who's more suitable to join the residents of Nine Supremes. Lan Ruojuan frowned and said, Boss isn't familiar with the personalities of the other Demiurge Flawed 10, but we know each other the best. There are a few stubborn ones that we might need to consider first. Ren Xingguang said, that's right. Strangely enough, Boss is really allowing all of us to enter the residence of Nine Supremes one by one? Isn't he the least bit worried that we'll form a clique? You should know that with the Demiurge Flawed 10's combined strength, it won't be easy for them to overpower Boss alone. It's a matter of course. Shi Wuchen rolled his eyes and said, that's why I said you're so narrow-minded. Do you think Boss doesn't know about the stakes? But will he care? Lan Ruojuan smiled bitterly. That's right, that's right. Boss really won't care. It's a waste for me to say this now. Who knows, maybe he's waiting for us to overpower him when he's giving us the power. When that happens, he'll definitely have a thunderous counterattack and subdue everyone in one fell swoop. Shi Wuchen's eyes widened in shock. Why do you sound like you have more confidence in him than I do? Lan Ruojuan laughed and said, "Yi Tuo, in the eyes of a wise man, all he sees is wisdom. In the eyes of trust, all he sees is loyalty. In the eyes of Yi Tuo, all you see is Yi Tuo." It's understandable. Shi Wuchen sucked in a deep breath and suddenly roared like a thunderbolt. Lan Ruojuan, I, Shi Wuchen, will never be able to coexist with you in this lifetime. Before his words echoed in the air, he roared again and pounced forward, throwing punches and kicks at Lan Ruojuan like rain. Lan Ruojuan did not seem to be surprised at all. Not to be outdone, he retaliated immediately. In just a moment, both of them were bruised and swollen, no longer looking human. Ren Qingquang sighed with his eyes closed. You're already like this. Boss is worried about you forming cliques. Natural and expected. What a joke, what a joke. Then, he kicked one of them and said, "Come over here and discuss business." Can't you be more serious? The three of them discussed as they walked towards the residence of 9 Supremes. Compared to the previous time, the items Yunyang had snatched this time were not much in terms of quality or quantity, but the General Commerce League still accepted them happily. Feng Guohai even came out to receive them personally and purchased them at a price 10% higher than the market price, but Yunyang did not agree to it. Business was a long-term affair, he could not just focus on a moment's profit. When can I? Feng Guohai's gaze was expectant. Enter the spirit's grave again? Yes. I thought I've made it clear the last time. I can simply open the grave anytime. Yunyang looked worried. But the problem now lies in the items I've passed to that person. I'm already lucky not to be killed with what I have on hand. How can I get more? Feng Guohai was a little embarrassed at the mention of this. Yunyang was not to be blamed. He had explained it repeatedly, but the batch of resources promised by the headquarters had yet to arrive. Let him in. What for? Brother Yun, how many resources do you think you'll need to go in? After these transactions, I have enough accumulated spirit jades on hand for the time being, but it's only enough to maintain my life. As for the other resources, Yunyang frowned and said, 10,000 years worth of heaven and earth resources. If there were a dozen of them, it would be more or less enough. Of course, if we could add a few pieces of rare metals and rare spirit Xian grade, it would be even better. He smiled bitterly. I originally planned to give them a small portion first, and then try to gradually increase it. That way, we will have more buffer space. If we give them too much at once, their demand will likely rise, and their appetite will become bigger and bigger. It will be difficult for us to deal with them, and if we don't do it right, we will inevitably lose everything. However, the reality now is that it's only enough to maintain the lowest standard of opening the spirit's grave. The other offerings have never been gathered. It's hard to say. He had naturally changed the form of address to we. Feng Guohai heard it and found it more pleasing to the ear. This was supposed to be something that everyone should work together to carry out. As he thought about it, Feng Guohai was already convinced about the spirit's grave. Chapter 937. This was what Yunyang was happy to see and hoped to achieve. As long as Feng Guohai, the person directly involved, was convinced, it would be much easier to influence the rest of the General Commerce League through his words. Feng Guohai sighed sympathetically, but his brows were tightly knitted. I'll make the best use of my time to arrange these things. This matter cannot be delayed, it must be done as soon as possible. Yunyang said, I can use the spiritual jades from selling the ethereal amethysts to cover part of the expenses as a sign of sincerity. Feng Guohai chuckled humorlessly. Brother Yun, your words are a slap to the General Commerce League's face. If you really do that, wouldn't all your efforts be in vain? taking the ethereal amethysts out of the spirit's grave to trade for spiritual jades and then using the spiritual jades to buy other items and send them in. What benefits can you get? How absurd. Yin Yang said with a smile, it's not that exaggerated. There are fewer benefits for me to do this, but it's not like there's no benefit at all. Aside from the fact that there's a certain degree of benefit from opening the spirit's grave, you should know this even if I don't mention it. Let's just say that I can use this opportunity to build my own business and strengthen my sect. Won't that be a huge profit too? He smiled faintly. Let's say that I can still make more friends in the process of trading with you, like you, Elder Feng. There's also the most crucial fourth point. The General Commerce League is buying the ethereal amethysts at a high price and selling the heaven and earth resources to me at a low price. There's already a considerable difference in price. It's understandable that one is greedy, but it's annoying to be too greedy. One must be kind. Feng Guohai's eyes widened as he murmured, Brother Yun, are you mistaken? We didn't promise to sell you anything at a low price. Yin Yang frowned and said, Huh? You didn't plan to sell it to me at a low price? Then I might have misunderstood. I'm greedy and annoying. Sigh, one can't be as greedy as I am when doing business. Feng Guohai almost choked when he heard Yin Yang's words. You've just said that selling at a high price and buying at a low price will give you a huge profit, that one must be kind and so on. I've only raised a slight objection and you're calling me greedy. Are you talking about yourself or someone else? Who's being annoying? Who's being unkind? Did he really think that no one could tell what he was saying? Brother Yun, you must be joking. How can you be annoying? Feng Guohai frowned. We can be sure that you're a kind man, Brother Yun. Yin Yang sighed and said, one must be kind. This is my life motto. Feng Guohai was speechless, almost flipping the table. How could someone like you have the face to tell me to be kind and honest? If we don't let you make money, then we're being unkind? You wanted to make money, so you suppressed our prices and made your own profits. Is that what you call being kind? To think that I praised you for a long time just now, and King returned my compliments to me. Feng Guohai said rather conflicted, I really didn't expect you, Yin Yang, to be such a person. At least, to me, you have the potential to be an unscrupulous businessman. You flatter me, Elder Feng. Yin Yang actually wanted to say, actually, I have the potential to gain something with nothing. However, he would never say it out loud even if he was beaten to death. He still had to preserve his dignity. He thought about it and said, actually, everyone in this world is an unscrupulous businessman. Everyone can be an unscrupulous businessman. What do you mean? Please enlighten me, Brother Yun. Feng Guohai asked. Everyone wants to gain the most by giving the least. Yin Yang said, everything is the same. This is human nature. The only difference is whether one has the ability to carry it out and complete it. That's all. Feng Guohai was deep in thought. He suddenly felt that the sentence was interesting and worth ruminating on. Thinking about it, it was indeed so. Even those who were clearly geniuses but still worked 1,000 times harder, knowing that there would be no gain without effort, actually thought the same. Otherwise, why would they work so hard? It was true that everyone was an unscrupulous businessman. The only difference was whether they could complete the entire process of being an unscrupulous businessman. This time, I'm here to handle this matter because there's a candidate on my side that hasn't been confirmed yet. Once it's settled, I'll send my majordomo to meet with Elder Feng. Actually, Elder Feng isn't unfamiliar with that person. Feng Guohai chuckled and said, that little fatty, isn't it? Yin Yang chuckled. He knew that little fatty Qian Duo did not have a good impression of Feng Guohai. After all, anyone would think that this fellow was rather unreliable when he was swaggering around the city with an ethereal amethyst. Little fatty doesn't have your godly skills. If you're sure to send him to meet with me for goods and resources, it's best to send a strong bodyguard along for safety. Feng Guohai said, otherwise, little fatty might be snatched away anytime. Wouldn't it be like drawing water with a sieve? Yin-yang nodded in agreement. Elder Feng, you're right. You'll be in charge of this bodyguard. It'll be safe. Feng Guohai glared at him. What did I say? Only me? I'm only giving you a suggestion, and it's to nip the problem in the bud. Why am I suddenly taking on a job for myself? You're playing along with me, aren't you? Are you trying to extort me? Elder Feng, please think about it. If my majordomo is really snatched away, Yin-yang said leisurely, it's not entirely my loss. I don't have a lot of people on my side. Our capabilities are meager. Why don't you choose among them and see who's capable enough to be little Fatty's bodyguard? Feng Guohai thought about it with a grimace and said, sigh, forget it. I'll assign a bodyguard to him. Speaking of which, Yin-yang and his companions were not qualified to secure such a valuable transaction with their meager capabilities. I might be able to get something special in exchange this time, so your resources better be efficient and fast. A transaction is about sincere cooperation and mutual benefit. It's not enough for me to show my goodwill alone, Yin-yang reminded before he left. Feng Guohai's eyes shone as he replied, all right. Once Yin-yang left, Feng Guohai hurried back to pack his things. It was best to put these things in the storeroom as soon as possible, especially Yin-yang's last reminder. In particular, Yin-yang's last reminder was of utmost importance. It had to be reported back quickly. Yin-yang, on the other hand, went back leisurely. The construction of the residence of 9 Supreme's base had been completed. The entire base was shrouded in a layer of clouds and mist, looking like a celestial palace in the sky. Chapter 938. Shi Wuchen had solemnly vowed to activate the formation with great fanfare, but in the end, there was no change at all. He was mocked by Lan and Ren, and it was only when Yin-yang returned that the mountain guarding formation was officially activated. May I ask, what are you trying to achieve by only infusing mystical qi to activate one formation eye? What are you trying to achieve? There are so many formation eyes, but you've only activated one. Is it reasonable for the formation to take shape? What kind of defensive effect can a formation like that have? Shi Wuchen's face was flushed from the stab, but he was immediately stunned by the change in front of him. He was speechless and tongue-tied, and his eyes almost became crooked. As Yin-yang's mystical qi flew out, the formation was fully activated. With a soft sound, the weather changed, and an invisible barrier rose from the ground, shooting straight into the sky. A moment later, the sun, moon, and stars emitted rays of light at the same time, descending upon the world and showering the residents of 9 Supreme's base. Boundless starlight focused on the residents of 9 Supremes, infinitely beautiful, but it disappeared in an instant. The trilite starlight seemed to have disappeared, but the density of spiritual qi within the residents of 9 Supremes suddenly increased. The spiritual qi from all directions seemed to have encountered an unprecedentedly huge spiritual qi whirlpool, surging toward it. All rivers converged into the sea, and all qi returned to its origin. In just a moment, the residence of 9 Supremes was already filled with abundant spiritual qi. Lan Ruojuan instinctively breathed in a mouthful of spiritual qi, but he choked. Shi Wuchen and the other two stood at the highest point of the residence of 9 Supremes, watching everything before them. Other than being dumbfounded, their mouths and eyes were crooked, completely indescribably horrified. How can the spiritual qi be so dense? How is this possible? Lan Ruojuan's jaw almost dropped. His eyes stared blankly, as if he was in a dream. A newly established sect, with only the activation of the mountain guarding formation, has the same supply of spiritual qi as all the sects with lower-class celestial luck banners. This isn't a dream, is it? Ren Qingquang was also dumbfounded. What's more frightening is that we can only see spiritual qi gathering now, but it's not dissipating. If this goes on for a long time. Shi Wuchen was so shocked that he stuttered. Even for Shi Wuchen, who had long expected this and was even more confident in Yin-yang, knowing that the formation set up using 108 pieces of ethereal amethysts as the formation base would certainly be extraordinary and would have extraordinary effects, What was going on now that it was only gathering and not dispersing? What was going on? The three of them felt the increasingly dense spiritual qi, and the atmosphere became more and more relaxed. It was as if with every breath of spiritual qi, the profound qi in their bodies would advance by leaps and bounds. I don't think I've ever had such a blissful time in my life. We really don't have the celestial luck banner here? Ren Xingguang was a little shocked and doubtful. Subconsciously, a thought that even he did not believe occurred to him. Have you never touched the celestial luck banner in the past? But did you sense the celestial luck banner in our station? Why are you asking such idiotic questions? Shi Wuchen snorted and looked at Ren Xingguang and Lan Ruojuan like he was looking at a country bumpkin. I know that poverty has limited your brains and imagination, but can't you hide it? Even if you don't find it embarrassing, I, the Supreme Sword of the Residence of Nine Supremes, find it embarrassing. Ren Xingguang's face was flushed as he retorted, "Tuo. Supreme scum. You're supreme scum, of course you're awesome. How awesome are you? But please watch your words. Be careful, or I'll fall out with you." Shi Wuchen snorted and said, "I have no intention of arguing with you now. Even if you fall out with me, what do I have to fear when you're so muddle-headed that you can't even sense the presence of the celestial luck banner?" Both of them stared at each other like fighting cocks. This scene had happened countless times in the past few days. Ren Xingguang was also skilled with the sword, so naturally, he coveted the title of Supreme Sword. No matter what, he had to fight for it. Therefore, they had sparred a few times due to quarrels. Unfortunately, these two people's cultivations were similar, their battle prowess was similar as well, and they knew each other's ins and outs like the back of their hands. Thus, every time they fought until they were completely exhausted, they would never be able to determine the victor, and it was difficult to determine the victor. It was also because of this that Shi Wuchen could not help but feel that the threat was growing, whereas Ren Xingguang felt that his goal was getting closer and closer, and he was brimming with confidence. During this period of time, Yun Yang had no intention of taking any action at all for the next half a month. He only focused on the construction of the sect. Under his and Xian Duoduo's supervision, the entire ground construction of the Residence of Nine Supremes base had been completed. The basic construction, including the disciples' dormitory, library, training room, canteen, toilet, flower shed, spiritual herb farm, merit tower, law enforcement hall, battle hall, chores room, warehouse, treasure vault, and so on, was completed as well. Moreover, there were already more than 1,000 people working in the sect. More than 200 newly recruited disciples of the Residence of Nine Supremes were practicing on the drill ground in front of them. These were all outer sect disciples recruited by Little Fatty. Among these people, only the most outstanding could be taken in as an inner sect disciple, and only those who performed outstandingly among the inner sect disciples could be taken in as an inner sect disciple by the Residence of Nine Supremes as an inner sect disciple. Above the inner sect disciples were the personal disciples, and the best among the personal disciples were the true disciples. Among the true disciples, those who met the standard of character and talent could become the official disciples. The next direct disciples were the core disciples. The first 10 core disciples were the top 10 disciples of the Residence of Nine Supremes, and the leader was the Residence of Nine Supremes leading disciple. However, the Residence of Nine Supremes leading disciple was very different from the other sects' leading disciples. First, the leading disciple was not the disciple of the Residence of Nine Supremes leader, who was Yun Yang. Secondly, the leading disciple would face challenges every once in a while, and only those who could win all of them could continue to sit firmly on the throne of the leading disciple. Otherwise, they would be replaced by those who advanced later. All in all, the rules set by Little Fatty were extremely complicated and harsh. From the moment the disciples entered the sect, they began a lifetime of endless competition. There are so many disciples here and there. Isn't it too complicated? Isn't it a little repetitive? The more names there are, the more people can compete with each other. Only by moving up level by level can one gain a sense of achievement step by step. This sense of achievement can cultivate the disciples' confidence, and they will never slack off no matter what. When little fatty Qian Duo explained the rules to Yun Yang's head was spinning, as if he had fallen into a fog. All right. You can do as you see fit in this aspect. That's right. I'm very familiar with the rules of these house plates. I'm very familiar with them. Of course, the residence of 9 Supremes has to get rid of the dross and keep the essence. Little Fatty had devoted himself to the building of the sect during this period of time. He was truly responsible, coming up with all sorts of rules and regulations. He had not slept well for more than a month. Little Fatty was so tired that he had lost a good 8 taels worth of weight. In spite of this, the rudimentary form of the entire sect was being built in this little fatty's hands. Furthermore, Yun Yang, Shi Wuchen, and the other two could not find any fault with the rules and regulations he had set. Even if they were not perfect, they were still extremely thorough. Lan Ruojuan's gaze when he looked at Qian Duo was even a little respectful. Chapter 939. Lan Ruojuan and the others had been in the bound of Universe's martial world for a long time. They were not novices like Yun Yang. They knew very well how difficult it was for a newly established sect to have a talent like Qian Duo who was good at everything. A sect's reputation would always be based on its combat prodigies. Those who stood at the pinnacle, those who roamed the martial world and enjoyed a high reputation. However, for a sect to truly grow strong, take root and build a strong foundation, it would always depend on obscure talents like Little Fatty who were able to preserve what they had achieved. Now, Little Fatty was still rambling on in Yun Yang's drowsiness. Since it's the residence of 9 Supremes, our disciples should first be distinguished by the color of their clothes. My suggestion is red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, black, white, and purple. Only those who hold the position of Supreme have the right to wear purple, while the other disciples start from red, level by level, blah, blah, blah. Little Fatty's saliva was flying everywhere, but he did not slack off at all, obviously feeling a sense of accomplishment. You've worked hard. Yun Yang sighed. Fatty, remember not to neglect your cultivation base. The majordomo needs to meet guests often as well. I have treasures with me, how can I neglect them? I'll cultivate wholeheartedly after this busy period. I know my place. Qian Duo stroked his chest proudly. I've also arranged everything in the warehouse. I've arranged all the resources you brought back. I've already sorted out the things that need to be sold and those that need to be kept for the sect's own use. I've already sorted them out. When it's time to use them, you can directly use them. I've also set up a spiritual gathering formation in the spiritual herb farm and planted all sorts of spiritual herb seeds. This is the key to our sect's future development. We can't be careless. When Little Fatty was done with his report and went back to rest contentedly, the 4 of them, including Yun Yang, felt as if their brains had been muddled, unable to move at all. The Little Fatty reported over 100 things in one go, and each of them had to be further categorized into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 big dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and even more subtle dots. The majordomo is indeed a talent. Lan Ruojuan said respectfully. Yes. A peerless genius. Ren Qingquang nodded. Shi Wuchen was in awe as well. Impressive. I really didn't expect that Little Fatty is such a character that makes people look at him in a whole new light. In front of the mountain gate, the mountain peak had been split into 2, revealing a smooth rock surface. The words Residence of 9 Supremes were written solemnly on the rock surface, glowing brightly. Each word was the size of a house and could be seen clearly even from 100 miles away. At this moment, he was at the peak of the mountain, looking down from above, looking down on everything within 10,000 miles. It was a pity that such a grand event had ended in silence. The entire martial world was still unaware that the residence of 9 Supremes had been quietly established, appearing in the world and standing on the bound of universe. On this day, the wind howled and clouds gathered. It was as though it was foretelling that the pugilistic world of the Xianhuang world was about to be filled with even more bloodshed. It was also on this day, in the afternoon of this day. Two silhouettes passed by the place as if it was fated, and they saw the words Residence of Nine Supremes. Residence of Nine Supremes? One of them frowned. Since when was such a sect established here? Why didn't I hear anything about it? It's strange. Everything within 10,000 miles of this place belongs to the Kangwoo Union. Since when did such a sect appear without our knowledge? Let's see how good this Residence of Nine Supremes is. What's the use of having a grand name? The one in front was thin and had a long horse-like face, while the other was short and round, with a round head, a round face, a round shoulders, a round stomach, a round waist, and round legs. He looked rather ridiculous, but his eyes were gleaming with a sharp, cold gleam. Although Kangwoo Union ranks last among the top 10 lower-class sects, we're not a sect that any rotten potato or bird's egg can provoke. Since this Residence of Nine Supremes has appeared out of thin air so abruptly, I'm afraid it must have an extraordinary foundation. If it grows stronger, it may become a great threat to us. How can we allow others to snore next to our bed? With that thought in mind, both men struck at the same time, wanting to test the Residence of Nine Supremes' background but also wanting to show off their strength. Unusually strong mystical chi whizzed toward the mountain gate of the Residence of Nine Supremes, their eyes filled with cruel mockery. A newly established sect? Good, not bad. Let's destroy its mountain gate first and demolish it. Let's see if this sect can still survive. As disciples of sects with 10 lower-class celestial luck banners, these two men had obviously done this many times before, so they were very familiar with it. This was something that had been happening in the bound of universe since ancient times. Every day, the same thing would happen countless times. It was only natural for disciples of celestial luck banners to eliminate hidden dangers. Moreover, these two men had demolished many sects, so they were very confident this time. However, the moment they made their move, both of them were stunned. The mountain gate of the Residence of Nine Supremes, which had withstood their joint attack, was safe and sound. The joint attack of the two of them was practically capable of shaking mountains, yet it had actually vanished without a trace and was completely useless. The mountain guarding formation of the Residence of Nine Supremes did not even sway. Both of their faces revealed shocked expressions at the same time. They were no longer as arrogant, despotic, and condescending as they were at the beginning. The two of them looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. This sect. I'm afraid it's really extraordinary. For a moment, fear rose in their hearts. It would be fine if it was within the territory of other sections. However, it was within Kangwoo Union. Now, it was the delicate juncture of the competition for the lower-class celestial luck banners, and it was still uncertain who would be the winner. Once the Residence of Nine Supremes rose, the first to bear the brunt would undoubtedly be Kangwoo Union, which was closest to it. If the Residence of Nine Supremes really participated in the competition for the celestial luck banners, its target would definitely be Kangwoo Union. Although they knew almost nothing about the Residence of Nine Supremes at the moment, the mountain guarding formation of the Residence of Nine Supremes was already so indestructible. Who knew and who could imagine what the true foundation of the Residence of Nine Supremes was? What level could it reach? The threat was too great. It was so great that it could threaten Kangwoo Union. Initially, they were just passing by, but now, it was as if they were facing a formidable enemy. At this time, the clouds at the mountain gate of the Residence of Nine Supremes parted quietly, and a faint voice said, "Who is it that dares to break into my mountain gate?" The horse-faced man took a deep breath and said, "Who is it that dares to open the mountain gate and establish a sect in the land under the rule of Kangwoo Union? Such an act is an affront to our school's prestige. What punishment do you deserve?" Chapter 940. The horse-faced man flew into a rage. Kangwoo belongs to 10,000 miles of mountains and rivers. This has been the law for 3,000 years. Who dares defy it? Yin Yang's mocking voice rang out from inside, "Kangwoo Union? The last of the 10 schools with lower-class celestial luck banners, right? Kangwoo belongs to 10,000 miles of mountains and rivers. Don't worry, this will soon be a thing of the past. That flag will be ours very soon. With a swoosh, a black illusory celestial luck banner landed abruptly in front of the residence of 9 Supreme's mountain gate. Green mystical chi rose from the horse-faced man as his long sword was unsheathed and he bellowed, "You bastards from the residence of 9 Supremes. How dare you? Listen up, I give you 3 days to disband your sects and withdraw from the territory under my sect's jurisdiction. Otherwise, the Kangwu Union will send an army to attack you. When the time comes, everything will be destroyed. Don't blame me for not warning you." Before he finished speaking, the two of them had already turned around. 2 shadows flickered and actually left just like that, disappearing without a trace. Obviously, these 2 fellows were not brainless, for they did not force themselves to attack the mountain. That probing attack just now was already the full strength of the 2 of them, but they were unable to even shake the mountain gate of the other party. The difference in strength was already clear. If the other party really came out, they would definitely not have a good ending. As the saying went, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Since they were destined to lose, they should go back and report to the sect as soon as possible so that they could gather their forces to uproot the other party. If they really attacked recklessly, it would be terrible if they lost their lives. What they did not know was that Yun Yang, who was inside, was also staring with wide eyes. He, who was as wise as a demon, did not expect this outcome at all. The other party had obviously come with an aggressive aura to stir up trouble, and had even attacked them directly. But after that, the other party had only cursed them for half a day, and seemed to be filled with righteous indignation. Why did the other party, who seemed to be filled with righteous indignation, just turn around and leave? How could such a thing happen in this world? However, Yun Yang understood the reason as soon as he thought about it. He could not help sighing inwardly. It seems that there are not many fools in the martial world. Putting everything else aside, at the very least, their ability to judge the situation and not stand under a collapsing wall was extraordinary. Even if he had to swallow his anger, he would not force himself to take the risk. This was a true Jianghu person. Don't be rash and impetuous when encountering trouble. Save yourself for the future. Then, he looked at the illusory black celestial luck flag that was stuck in front of the mountain gate. There were obviously words swaying on it. Kangwu. Kangwu. Kangwu Union, the last school among the 10 schools with lower-class celestial luck banners under the Eastern Celestial Palace's Sacred Heart Palace. How strong is this school? Yun Yang murmured. It was not difficult to describe the commotion just now, but the whole process had only taken a moment, less than half a cup of tea's time at most. That was why Shi Wuchen and the other 2 had only just arrived. When they heard Yun Yang's words, they interrupted. Although Kangwu Union's ability is acknowledged to be the lowest among the 10 lower-class celestial luck banners, it's not to be underestimated. As far as I know, there are no royal saint experts in Kangwu Union, but their leader is at the pinnacle of saint level 4. It's said that this person is only a hair's breadth away from the realm of royal saint. There are also 6 to 7 other saint level 3 and 4 experts. Their combined ability is very strong. Yun Yang nodded solemnly. So, their overall ability isn't something we can shake. Lan Ruojuan sighed and said, I don't want to admit it, but this is the reality. It's hard to deny it. Not to mention us now, even if the Demiurge Flawed 10 were to gather as planned, our overall ability would still fall short. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, Kangwu Union. Very well. This shall be our first target. Looking at the celestial luck banner in front of the gate, he smiled and said, I think that banner is not bad. I quite like it. Shi Wuchen and the other 2 exchanged looks. It couldn't be. A sect that had just been established a few days ago, and their boss was going to go head-on against Kangwu Union? Did he not understand what Lan Ruojuan had said just now? Lan Ruojuan thought about it for a moment and sighed. Words are spoken. We have no choice but to go head-on now. Kangwu Union has already made us their target. It's not something we can just retreat from. Yun Yang chuckled. That's discouraging. It's still up in the air who will be whose target. Boss, just tell us what we should do now. Yun Yang said lightly, what should we do? Let's just deal with it coldly. I'm only asking you, can they break through our mountain guarding formation? All of you just focus on cultivating. Don't worry about these external affairs. Right, there's one more thing that I need you to deal with as soon as possible. Don't be in a hurry to cultivate. Split up and go out to recruit soldiers. Our primary goal is to gather the Demiurge Flawed 10 that Lan Ruojuan mentioned just now. We must gather all of them in the shortest time possible before we talk about anything else. Yin Yang said, the residents of Nine Supreme's actions in the next half a year should be based on people. Alright, understood. Let's go our separate ways. Remember to disguise yourselves. Now is not the time for us to be brazen. Be careful and don't be rash. If there's any danger, you can ask for help from the General Commerce League. It's a waste not to use our staunch ally. Yes, understood. Go. Boss, what if Kangwu Union comes after we leave? Don't worry. Do what you need to do. I have a plan. A sharp glint flashed across Yun Yang's eyes. Shi Wuchen and the other two were reluctant to leave, looking back every 3 steps as they left at a desperate speed. They had never come across such a place of cultivation in their entire lives. Cultivating here for half a month was almost equivalent to cultivating elsewhere for half a year or more. How could they bear to leave if it was not necessary? However, they could only leave when they thought of the great cause of their sect. Everyone had made up their minds, find them as fast as they could and rush back. If they disagreed, knock them out and carry them back. All in all, they had to go and return as soon as possible. There was still Kangwu Union. As long as they returned, they would fight alongside their boss. They had drifted for so many years before they finally had this base. How could they allow Kangwu Union to destroy it so easily? It was impossible even if they risked their lives. Once again, Yun Yang was left alone in the residence of Nine Supremes. Looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar buildings before him, Yun Yang's mind was in a whirl as his imagination ran wild. The Kangwu Union that had stirred up a storm just now was nothing in his eyes. The buildings before him were an enlarged version of the residence of Nine Supremes that he had built based on his impression of it in his mind. To Yun Yang, the residence of Nine Supremes had always been of utmost importance and could not be neglected. He looked at the 9 peaks that represented the Nine Supremes' rooms in silence, his eyes gleaming. Chapter 941. Brothers, the residence of Nine Supremes that represents the Nine Supremes still stands tall in the bound of universe, a realm that's a level higher than the Tianxian continent we were born in. I won't stop, I'll only work hard to move forward, hoping that one day in the future, we'll truly meet again. Yun Yang moved in a flash, his purple robes fluttering as he circled the 9 peaks. This was the true completion of the mysterious connection between the Nine Supremes' peaks, allowing the Nine Supremes' dictum's effect to appear once again in the bound of universe. Yin Yang wore a nostalgic look on his face as he smiled to himself. With a single thought, a purple table appeared in the study of the Supreme Cloud Tower that no one had set foot in since the day it was built, in the heart of the newly built residence of Nine Supremes, a table that was entirely purple in color, sparkling and translucent. With a wave of Yun Yang's hand, the long-awaited Nine Supremes' dictum reappeared and automatically entered the platform. Then, the platform glowed with an even more dazzling radiance. After the intense radiance faded, the Nine Supremes' dictum slowly flew back into Yun Yang's hand. Yun Yang stared at his surroundings for a while, a little lost, and murmured, "From now on, this is the real residence of Nine Supremes." Then, he turned and left. Yun Yang was as handsome as ever, his purple robes fluttering in the wind. Wherever he passed, more than 200 new disciples knelt on the ground. "Your disciples greet Supreme Cloud." His purple robes fluttered past. Cultivation methods. The cultivation methods that the residence of Nine Supremes taught its disciples were all mixed and impure. After all, they were third-rate goods that Yun Yang and the others had snatched during this period of time. How could there be any truly superior cultivation methods? In spite of this, these cultivation methods were enough for the disciples to build their foundation, to eliminate the weak and retain the strong, to preserve a portion of them who could become experts. It was unrealistic to say that all the disciples who entered the residence of 9 Supremes could walk to the peak with outstanding talent. It was imperative to eliminate a large number of talents. Behind them, little fatty Qianduoduo's voice came, "You've just entered the sect. It's enough for you to obtain these low-level cultivation methods. When your foundation is strong enough and you stand out, you'll naturally be able to receive the sect's legacy of a higher level. Young fellows, the future of the strong is equal to everyone. Now, it's all up to you to see if you can get through this hellish preliminary. If you want to become a great man, you must first endure the hardships of hardships and temper yourself in all sorts of ways. Only then can you become a sharp weapon, and only by bathing in fire can you become a phoenix. We, the residents of 9 Supremes, do not raise trash. We only want talented people." Yun Yang did not linger, drifting far away. With a single step, he had already vanished without a trace. He had turned into a gust of wind and left in a cloud of dust. Even though Shi Wuchen and the other two aren't here, can't I be the raiders of all but God by myself? Now that Kangwu Union had come knocking on his door, Yun Yang felt that he could not just passively take a beating. The best way was to come to them himself. Now that the residence of 9 Supremes was so short of cultivation techniques, was Kangwu Union not a very good target? Yun Yang could not bear to leave the Kangwu Union's cultivation methods and esoterica to collect dust. At this time, the area in front of Swallow's Hill had already become a pot of muddled porridge. More than a dozen experts from sects with celestial luck banners were unwilling to give up and were waiting here. They hoped and believed that the raiders of all but God would not disappear just like that, and that they would definitely come again. Xiao Yushu and Gu Jiuxiao were here as well. Both of them were resting with their eyes closed, adjusting themselves to their best state at all times, ready to rescue at any time. This was because they knew very well that the raiders of all but God would never stop, and that they could come again at any time to commit a crime. However, Yun Yang and the others had not been here for a long time. Until today, Yun Yang chose to go to another mountain that was diagonally across from him. He pulled out the raiders of all but God's name again and plundered there for 3 consecutive days. Once he had attracted everyone's attention, he left immediately. To Yun Yang, what he lacked now was cultivation techniques. Kangwu Union, ranked last among the 10 lower-class celestial luck banner sects. Tension filled the air on Kangwu Mountain. All the disciples were doing their best to focus on cultivation. Everyone was in a hurry now. The battle of ascension and capturing the banners was imminent. It went without saying that the entire sect needed to work together. Similarly, this was also the best path for the disciples to ascend. As long as they contributed to the sect's ascension battle, or even if they did not have to contribute, being chosen to participate in the battle would be a great honor, and many benefits would come one after another. At the very least, the identity of a direct disciple was unavoidable. This was a battle of fate and survival. No one, no matter who it was, would let their guard down at this moment. They could not, and they dared not. On the high platform, 3 silhouettes stood with their hands behind their backs. Their expressions were calm as they quietly observed the disciples' training. Have the people who went to besiege the raiders of all but God returned? Not yet. According to the report, the raiders of all but God has not appeared for a long time. Say, who do you think the raiders of all but God, the black and white ruthless duo are? The person in the middle asked faintly. Could it be a true disciple of some sect in disguise? To achieve some goal? The other two were horrified. Eldest senior brother's words have woken us up. According to my inference, everything can be traced. The raiders of all but God's sudden appearance, elusive movements, and unsightly tactics are secondary. What's more important is that no one can recognize their cultivation technique and body movement technique. This itself is already suspicious and raises suspicions. The leader was still indifferent. This is a crucial moment. Everything should make way for the battle to stay in the sect. We can't waste so much effort and even lose our men for such trivial matters. Pass down my order, withdraw all our men. Yes. As they spoke, suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out from the cluster of buildings behind him, followed by a sharp alarm that cut through the sky. The three of them froze when they heard the alarm. They turned their heads at the same time, and three silhouettes dashed out like three giant birds. At the same time, countless silhouettes from all directions rushed back in the same direction. Everyone's expression was solemn. The direction of the alarm was the Tower of Martial Keeping, the center of the sect. The people of Kangwu Union were puzzled as they sprinted toward the location of the incident. Strictly speaking, it was a delicate time for the sects with celestial luck banners to compete. It was not unusual for someone with ulterior motives to target Kangwu Union. However, the sect's mountain shielding formation did not react at all when someone sneaked in. This meant that there was a problem with the Tower of Martial Keeping. That was a huge problem. How did the thief get in? The mountain shielding formation had always been the foundation of the sects with celestial luck banners and even all sects, associations, and aristocratic families. It was the most secure, so how could there be such a flaw? Chapter 942. What he did not know was that Yun Yang, who had turned into a breeze, had entered the Kangwu Union without any hindrance. Even he himself felt that the result was strange and unbelievable. It was too easy. There was no reaction at all when he passed through the Kangwu Union's mountain guarding formation. Yun Yang even thought that the formation had some other trick or was brewing some extreme attack, so he hesitated for a while, ready to face the other party's counterattack. However, there was still no reaction after a long while. The infiltration was too easy. It was nothing like breaking through the mountain guarding formation of a sect with a celestial luck banner. As Yun Yang snuck into the Kangwu Union, he instinctively realized that the Kangwu Union's mountain guarding formation did not have the ability to protect the deific consciousness. Otherwise, how could it not have sensed his infiltration? Although his manifestation divine arts were profound, they were still connected to his primordial spirit and primordial spirit. No matter how formless, traceless, and traceless they were, it was inevitable that there would be some peculiar ripples. Although the probing of the divine consciousness could not detect everything, there would always be some traces to follow. However, Kangwu Union's mountain guarding formation showed no reaction at all. The only explanation was that this mountain guarding formation did not have any protection against divine consciousness. But, isn't this a little too unreasonable? Yun Yang could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. As a major sect with a celestial luck banner, they did not even have this little bit of protection. In fact, a formation like the one built in the residence of 9 Supremes that could isolate deific consciousness was not the only one in this world, but there were not many of them, and they could be counted with one's fingers. As for Yun Yang's manifestation powers, which could transform into wind and cloud, it was also a unique arcane art that had never been heard of in this world, beyond the knowledge of this world's cultivators. Perhaps it would still be hindered by the arcane art of space, such as the art of prison, but it was truly a marvelous art. Yun Yang reached the Tower of Martial Keeping without any trouble, feeling relaxed and at ease. However, his good luck ended there. The reason was simple. The surroundings of the Kangwu Union's Tower of Martial Keeping were filled with the deific consciousness of experts. They were dense and impenetrable. From afar, the doors of the Tower of Martial Keeping were wide open. The 4-story building was filled with rows of bookshelves. On the topmost layer, there were numerous jade slips that could be seen with one's eyes and seemed to be easily obtainable. But the reality was completely different. The entire Tower of Martial Keeping was like a divine consciousness space, with no gaps or loopholes to exploit. Yun Yang was a knowledgeable man. He knew that it would be difficult for his manifestation powers to be as smooth as before in such a situation. He stopped and frowned, coming up with a countermeasure. With Emmy and his endless divine art, he was confident that he could take care of the Tower of Martial Keeping if it was only the power of deific telekinesis. However, there was a huge, unique outline above the Tower of Martial Keeping that could not be bypassed. That special outline was invisible and hard to see with the naked eye, but it really existed. It was a flag, the Celestial Luck Flag. Kangwoo Union had placed their black Celestial Luck banner directly in the Tower of Martial Keeping, but it was unknown whether it was for a special protective function or some other purpose. Seeing that the Kangwoo Union Celestial Luck banner was here as well, Yun Yang dared not be negligent as he calmly confirmed all the defenses in the Tower of Martial Keeping. There were 4 old men guarding the entrance of the Tower of Martial Keeping. 2 of them were inside and 2 of them were outside. All of them are saint-level experts. This is going to be tricky, Yun Yang thought to himself. Faced with such a situation, especially under the premise that his manifestation powers could hardly function, how could he accomplish his set goal? Yun Yang only hesitated for a moment before he made a decision immediately. His entire body turned into a cloud of mist once more. From the sky as a starting point, he unleashed his highest speed and dashed toward the direction of the Tower of Martial Keeping with his greatest agility. Before he arrived, the howling wind had already stirred up the air currents in the air. The force of it was terrifying and unparalleled. The alarm rang immediately from below. 4 silhouettes sprung up simultaneously, intending to stop him. However, it was obvious that the 4 of them did not expect the intruder to be invisible to the naked eye. Having missed the first chance to stop him, Yun Yang, who was already carrying the force of wind and thunder, crashed violently into the Tower of Martial Keeping's defense. It was only the simplest and most direct collision, but the mystical chi shield inside the Tower of Martial Keeping was broken. Yun Yang was still a little surprised that he could break through the mystical chi shield of the Tower of Martial Keeping so easily. He had been prepared to spend more effort if the mystical chi shield was rather strong, but the moment the shield was broken, he realized that the mystical chi shield could only slightly obstruct the enemy. It was more of a warning like the divine sense web and the celestial luck banner. After all, the momentary obstruction was enough for Kangwoo Union's men to come over. On the other hand, if the mystical chi shield was too strong, the attacker would definitely destroy it forcefully. A slight mishap would cause considerable damage to the mystical art inside the Tower of Martial Keeping while the mystical chi shield was broken. Even if the attacker was killed afterward, the loss would outweigh the gain. In spite of this, it was hard for Kangwoo Union's men to imagine that someone would brazenly attack the Tower of Martial Keeping in broad daylight, right in the middle of their own school, after setting up all these to guard against thieves and to gain more buffer time. The turbulent air currents in the air rushed straight into the Tower of Martial Keeping at an extreme speed. Everything happened so suddenly and unexpectedly. The 4 men who had leaped up had reacted correctly, charging towards Yun Yang's incoming force. However, they did not see Yun Yang's cloud manifestation, allowing him to brush past them. By the time they came back to their senses, Yun Yang had already charged into the Tower of Martial Keeping. The shattering of the mystical chi shield was proof enough. Then, the celestial luck banner that hovered in the air above the Tower of Martial Keeping swayed and disappeared. Then, a white silhouette appeared abruptly, appearing in the Tower of Martial Keeping with a meow. It was a small kitten that was not more than 2 feet long and was entirely white. However, it appeared to be in a state of panic as it ran around the Tower of Martial Keeping. His speed was as fast as lightning, fast to the extreme. The 4 experts rushed into the pavilion, flustered and exasperated. When they saw this little thing, they couldn't help but let out a quack sound. They were all stunned. Could it be that the huge commotion just now was caused by such a tiny creature? Was it possible? Meow, Whitey too wagged its tail timidly and sprawled on the ground, looking at the 4 people with an aggrieved expression. Catch it. No matter what, they had to capture this strange kitten first. The 4 of them attacked at the same time, but Whitey too once again fled in all directions with unbelievable agility. From east to west, from south to north, even with the 4 saint-level cultivators working together, it was still difficult to capture it in a short amount of time. Meow, there was a long cry. In an instant, the white cat's speed seemed to have increased. Like an illusory white shadow, it dashed out of the gap between the four people. One of them felt a chill at his crotch. The tiny white cat that had escaped was already hundreds of feet away, turning back and meowing pitifully, meow. Meow, it seemed to be saying, "Don't catch me, I didn't do it on purpose." Chapter 943. How can a kitten be so fast? How can it be? One of them exclaimed in shock. Has it reached the level of a heaven-level mystical beast? More than that, this kitten is most likely a mutated mystical beast. Is it still a cub? It looks like, as the four men discussed, they did not relax their plan to hunt down the strange white cat. Whether it was a mystical beast or a demonic beast that had advanced into a level, whether it was a beast with a master or without, they had to capture it first before anything else. At this time, the other experts from the Kangwoo Union had arrived as well, surging in from the sky and from the ground. What's going on? A cat? Catch it. Voices rose and fell, incessant as the commotion grew louder. Only the leader of the Kangwoo Union and his two junior brothers dashed into the tower of martial keeping like lightning, ignoring the little kitten that was running for its life. To them, no exotic beast was more important than the safety of their treasured cultivation methods and the celestial luck banner. Using Whitey 2 to temporarily divert the attention of the Tower of Martial Keeping's guards and lure them out of the building, Yun Yang knew that the opportunity could not be missed. Without any hesitation, he waved his hand and swiftly took away all the shelves on the first level. Once he had succeeded, he did not stop and went up to the second level like a whirlwind. With another wave of his hand, the bookshelves on the second level disappeared as well, and without a pause, he charged up to the third level. Just like that, he emptied the third level's treasures and sprinted towards the fourth level from the third level. However, he suddenly felt an unusually strong force coming from the highest level above him. Not only was the force unstoppable, it was also imbued with the ability to confine space. The heaven and earth cage? A thought flashed across Yun Yang's mind, but he still charged up and faced it head-on. If he dodged and retreated now, he would never be able to ascend to the highest level. The force came crashing down. The heaven and earth cage was adept at subduing all mystical arts in the world, and its power was even more formidable. If Yun Yang was in his physical form and met this force head-on, he would definitely die. However, he was now in the form of wind and clouds. Although he was still restrained by the power of the cage of heaven and earth, he could not directly destroy the wind and clouds. In other words, this tyrannical force first targeted the space, and then completely destroyed the incoming enemies with a crushing force. While Yin Yang's form of wind and cloud was countered by this force, he was able to gain some breathing space. With a crisp "pu" sound, the wind cloud body was crushed by this force, unable to resist at all. However, the spatial shackles also ceased to exist. In the end, Yin Yang's manifestation of wind and cloud was broken, but his physical body was still intact. Yin Yang, who had won the gamble, did not seem to be feeling too good. He felt as if his internal organs and even his deific consciousness and soul had been hammered by a 10,000 catty hammer. His body and mind were all crushed, and he felt waves of dizziness. The enemy had actually set up an extremely powerful powerhouse on the highest floor of the Martial Keeping Pavilion. They had predicted the enemy's moves and caught them off guard. Yin Yang tried his best to maintain the last bit of clarity he had and dashed up to the fourth floor with all his might. He saw a tall elder at the top of the staircase, staring at the empty space in front of him in bewilderment. It was obvious that the elder had no confidence in whether his attack had hit the enemy or not. An invisible enemy like the manifestation of wind and cloud to conceal its tracks was the most troublesome. This person was unsure if his attack had been effective and to what extent. However, as Yin Yang moved again, the other party noticed the change in the flow of air and turned to cast another cage of heaven and earth. Yin Yang had just dashed up to the highest floor and he was trapped by the cage of heaven and earth again. However, he was not in a hurry. He was still in his manifestation of wind and cloud. Although the other party was restraining him, he was still unable to see him. As Yin Yang had expected, the elder squeezed the space once more. Yin Yang could not evade it and was crushed again, but he could still gather his cloud chi and advance soundlessly. The man's attack was still fruitless, his expression turning unprecedentedly grim. The other party was obviously an experienced foe as well. He could acutely sense that he had encountered the toughest enemy he had ever encountered in his life. Such an invisible enemy could not be tracked at all. There was no way for him to launch an effective attack. Even when he knew that the enemy was right beside him, he could not lock on to the other party and could hardly aim at him. The two attacks just now clearly felt like they had hit the enemy, but his intuition told him that they had actually hit the air, and there was no sense of obstruction or backlash. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. What was the truth then? Had the enemy been hit after these two attacks? Had he been injured? What was going on now? He was completely clueless about all of this. As the elder made his judgment, he turned to attack continuously with palm strike after palm strike. Obviously, he trusted his judgment as a martial artist. Since the other party had invaded, he must have come with a purpose. His two attacks just now had affected the other party to a certain extent, whether or not they had caused actual damage. The cage of heaven and earth was the nemesis of all arcane skills in this world. It would eventually work if he were to slowly whittle away at the other party's mystical chi and energy. The elder had a good plan, but after 7 strikes, he was shocked to find that all the shelves on the 4th floor had disappeared in an instant. This person must have been injured under such a concentrated attack, no matter how marvelous his arcane skill was. Even at such a time, he was still harboring evil intentions. Coward. Seeing the change, the elder's beard bristled as he roared, "Leave the item behind." Then, he struck 3 more times in a frenzy. The force was several times stronger than the previous 9 strikes. Following the 3 consecutive palm strikes, the entire roof of the Tower of Martial Keeping was blown away by the tyrannical palm force and shattered into pieces with a loud bang. It was then that Kangwu Union's leader, Hong Changtian, arrived with his 2 junior brothers, calling out from afar, "Senior uncle. Is the Tower of Martial Keeping all right?" All of this was troublesome to say, but it had all happened in an instant. The senior uncle looked guilty as he roared madly, "The thief has looted the Tower of Martial Keeping's arcane skill manuals. Come quickly." The trio was shocked, their expressions changing as they rushed in. Yin Yang, on the other hand, only had 30% of his wind manifestation left, scattered at the staircase. The 3 of them brushed past him and rushed to the top floor. It was just a brush, but they almost brought Yin Yang's manifestation up with them. Yin Yang mustered his mystical skill and with Emmy's help, he finally managed to make his wind manifestation float upwards slowly. His energy was severely depleted now, so he could no longer fly away at full speed at once. Chapter 944. The rooftop of the Tower of Martial Keeping. Hong Changtian's face was ashen as he watched the chaotic scene unfold before him, his entire body trembling uncontrollably. Who is it? Who did this? Everyone stood in silence, their faces pale and chills running down their spines. Their sex elites were all gathered here, yet the enemy still managed to force their way in with a method that was close to a violent assault, and looted the entire Tower of Martial Keeping. The entire sect's thousands of years' worth of martial arts manuals were swept clean, not a single drop was left. But that wasn't the most important thing. The most terrible thing was that they had so many people on their side, but from the beginning to the end, none of them had seen what the enemy looked like. They didn't even know which force or sect the enemy came from. The frustration of having nowhere to vent was driving them mad. The enemy is invisible, there's no trace to follow. The sect leader who guarded the Tower of Martial Keeping was especially dejected. He had been fighting all his life, only to suffer such a huge setback in his old age. He could be considered the only person in Kangwu Union who had confronted the attacker head-on, but he did not even get a tiny bit of information from the attacker. This meant that the enemy had snatched the cultivation technique right under his nose when he was on full alert and escaped unscathed. At that moment, the old man almost had the urge to commit suicide as an apology. Invisible? There's no trace to follow. Hong Changtian's brows furrowed as he mumbled, could it be, the raiders of all but God? The raiders of all but God's rampage on Swallows Hill was within Kangwu Union's jurisdiction. As the sect leader of Kangwu Union, he was naturally privy to information that others did not. For example, the raiders of all but God would sometimes perform an extremely bizarre vanishing technique that could render them immune to all attacks, but it doesn't seem like it. The raiders of all but God did not completely vanish like today. Sect leader, what should we do? We have to deal with it. The others were burning with anxiety. Their top priority now was naturally to hunt down the enemy and retrieve the sect's manuals. Only then could they recoup their losses. Why was the sect leader in a daze? Of course we have to investigate, but to hunt them down? That's impossible. Hong Changtian took a deep breath and said, to be able to hide himself under Uncle Master's repeated attacks and even rob the Tower of Martial keeping clean, this person is no simple character. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the fact that he was able to endure Martial Uncle's world cage and still insist on taking away all the secret manuals shows how confident he is. Capturing him now is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Chasing after him will only be a waste of energy. Hong Changtian said, let's not do anything for now. Later, we'll send all our disciples out to check the movements of the surrounding sections. In addition, many of the stolen cultivation methods have obvious characteristics. We have to pay special attention to this point. Don't let go of any clues. Also, the 4 people who went after the demonic cat today. Hong Changtian's eyes flashed with anger. How could they have fallen for the enemy's trap so easily? This is unforgivable. I'll go collect 100 venomous dragon whips later. 100 venomous dragon whips. Everyone sucked in a cold breath when they heard that. The so-called venomous dragon whips were whips made from mystical beast tendons, specifically used to whip and punish disciples who had broken the sect's rules. It was fine if it was just a whip, but the venomous dragon whips were full of barbs. A single lash would tear off a large piece of skin and flesh. It was not a punishment that could be easily endured. Not to mention that the victim's cultivation base had to be sealed during the punishment process, enduring it with only his physical body. After 100 venomous dragon whips, the victim would be half dead even if he did not die. However, the sect leader's face was steely. This was indeed an unforgivable mistake. Even if the others wanted to, they dared not hastily plead for leniency. This mistake was equivalent to losing the sect's foundation. The entire Kangwu Union was silent as cicadas in winter. By the way, remember to pay attention to those new rising sections. They have a motive to commit the crime as well. Hong Changtian's face was as cold as frost, his expression bleak. He sighed softly and said, it has been 2,700 years since Kangwu Union's founding ancestor finally obtained the Celestial Luck Banner. Now that 3,000 years have passed, not only has our sect status not improved, but we've also lost our foundation. How can I face the ancestral master when I reach the netherworld? Everyone's faces were gloomy like water, and their hearts were icy cold. What the sect leader said was exactly what they were thinking. Had Kangwu Union reached its end? If we can't find these treasured tomes. Hong Changtian sighed faintly, shaking his head and saying no more. Sect leader Bing, Ma Xingyun and Yan Tang are back. They say they have something important to ask of you, sect leader. Let them wait. How could they be interested in meeting the disciples and listening to the so-called important matter at this time? After giving a series of orders, Hong Changtian led the elders back to the sect's great hall. Today's matter couldn't be leaked at least for a short period of time. Even the disciples of the sect had to strictly keep it a secret. Otherwise, the disciples of the sect would be in a state of panic, and the worst-case scenario would be that the morale of the people would collapse before the battle even started. Before this competition, if the morale of the people was unstable, then it would truly be a disaster. Outside, Ma Xingyun and Yan Tang, who were waiting to be summoned, felt helpless. In the past, when they had gone out and discovered a new sect, the sect leader would definitely receive them and reward them when they reported back. The sect would also immediately take action against them to eliminate the threat. Why was it that this time, when a sect with great potential was established right under their noses, the sect's higher-ups were indifferent to the matter? Not even a senior from the sect with a higher status showed up, and they just ignored him? What was going on? This was obviously very important information. Perhaps the two of them didn't even think that the reason their sect was in such bad luck was because the two of them had gone out and provoked a small sect, which led to this terrible consequence. If Hong Changtian found out that the reason why his sect was robbed was because of these two men, causing the thief to target Kangwu Union, he would probably skin them alive on the spot. A storm was still raging inside Kangwu Union. After suppressing his temper for a long time, the sect leader finally erupted hysterically. He did not want to lose his temper, but he really could not suppress it. Today's incident had not only enraged him, but also pained him. What was wrong with his own sect? How could they fall for such an obvious trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain? This was simply ridiculous. Especially those few who were still crying out that they were innocent. This made the sect leader even angrier. Innocent, innocent? How are you innocent? Did you catch that kitten? No. Can you catch it? We can't. Why do you still chase if you can't? Don't you know the responsibility you bear? Do you feel that you have nothing better to do? Hong Changtian felt like he was about to explode from anger. Let me ask you, don't you think it's strange that such a cat suddenly appeared in such an important place? Let me ask you, this kitten, all of you find it cute and interesting, but have you ever thought that this demonic beast, which is obviously a pet, actually has an owner? You're just going to chase the cat without thinking? Where are your brains? Fed to the dogs? How can you have the cheek to cry out that you're innocent? Chapter 945. The few of them lowered their heads. We can think of that too, but isn't our third Uncle Master still inside? With our Uncle Master there, what problem could there be? Who would have thought that even our third Uncle Master could not stop him? Besides, if even our third Uncle Master could not stop him, what use is there for us to stay? What can we do if you keep blaming us? However, these words were only in their minds. No one dared to say it out loud. You know that you're shouldering a heavy responsibility, but you still went after the cat like a swarm of bees. Then, who's going to guard against the person behind the cat? Who's going to protect the sex esoterica? Who's going to let someone with ulterior motives break into the sect? Don't you know what to say? Are you speechless? Isn't that the truth? Your foolish actions have allowed the other party to break into the sect, steal the esoterica, and escape unscathed. Do you think I've wronged you by punishing you? Men, drag him away. Execute him. The entire Kangwu Union tensed up as soon as he said that. Sect leader, I'm afraid it's not going to be effective if we only investigate like this. It's more meaningful to conduct a post-mortem review before we recoup our losses, the sect leader's Uncle Master said when no one else was around. He was the only one who had fought with the mysterious thief, Yun Yang. Naturally, he knew how terrifying this thief was. If they were to investigate with the current method, they might not be able to find out anything in this lifetime. How can I not know this? Hong Changtian sighed and said, Uncle Master Wu, this time, I'm afraid our sect is truly doomed. At the very least, we'll be severely injured, but at the very least, we'll never be able to recover. Uncle Master Wu sighed deeply and nodded in agreement. The timing of the theft of the esoterica is too coincidental. It's a delicate moment when we can't do anything about it. Hong Changtian said in a low voice, the competition is near, and the sect is facing either a demotion or a promotion. We don't have much energy to investigate this matter. But we can't pretend that nothing has happened. Uncle Master Wu instantly understood the meaning of the sect leader's words. Of course these esoterica are important to us. But no matter how important they are, they can't be more important than the sect's survival. What I'm thinking about now is that we've survived the competition. As long as we can maintain our level or even advance, we will have at least another 3 years of buffer time. Naturally, we will be able to investigate and settle this matter in these 3 years. But if we send in the experts of the sect to investigate the matter with great fanfare right now, not only will we lose our own strength, but we can't guarantee that we won't attract the covetous eyes of more people because of this matter, which will make our situation even worse, and we will be overwhelmed. If our sect is demoted because of this, you and I will be the sinners of Kangwu Union for all eternity, Hong Changtian said with tears in his eyes. He clenched his fists tightly and his eyes were filled with hatred. This thief was really too hateful. Even if he stole some heavenly treasure or some unparalleled divine weapon, it would still be much better than stealing these secret manuals. No matter who stole our sect's secret scriptures, as long as we find out who it is, we'll make sure they die a horrible death and regret this life. Hong Changtian gnashed his teeth in hatred. Yin Yang quietly appeared in a secluded valley hundreds of miles away from Kangwu Union and landed slowly. Just as he revealed himself, he spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood impatiently, staining the ground crimson. The consumption this time could be said to be beyond the limit. The strength possessed by Kangwu Union was far beyond Yin Yang's original expectations. He had been listening to Kangwu sect's leader's movements and knew that he was only a saint at the pinnacle of 4th level. Yin Yang was confident that he could escape from the man's clutches. Even if he was not 90% sure, he was not far from it. Even though his strength was low, his mystique was definitely one of a kind in the bound of universe. Yet, he did not expect that there would be a Saint Emperor hidden in Kangwu Union. Yes, it was that Uncle Master Wu. He had cast the heaven and earth cage a dozen times in a row. It was impossible for anyone who was not a Saint Emperor to do so. Yin Yang firmly believed that no one in the martial world knew about this, not even Kangwu Union itself. The rumors in the martial world that Kangwu Union, which ranked last in the lower-class celestial luck banners, had the vague intention of leapfrogging and ascending was not entirely groundless. With such an expert in charge, it was not certain that they could not ascend. Facing such an expert, even though Yin Yang had the manifestation powers and could transform into wind and cloud, completely unharmed by external forces, he was still shattered 7 to 8 times by Uncle Master Wu's restraining technique. If Yin Yang had not advanced his wind and cloud manifestation to a higher realm, he would not have been beaten to death but would have been smashed into pieces, with no limbs left. It would have been an unspeakable death, and his soul would have been obliterated, never to be reincarnated. Even though Yin Yang was lucky to escape now, he did not escape unscathed. He was exhausted and severely injured. When he floated out in the air, he had already lost his consciousness, relying solely on Emmy to support him. It was only when he arrived here that he regained his human form. Yin Yang struggled to stuff a few healing pills into his mouth. Emmy's air of vitality flowed into him like it was free of charge. Only then did Yin Yang's internal organs, which were on the brink of shattering, come back to life. He could barely maintain his functions. Even so, Yin Yang could not move his body at all, and could only wait for a slow recovery. If a villain were to pass by now, Yin Yang would be completely helpless and would be able to do whatever the other party wanted to do with him. Despite his dire condition, Yin Yang felt that the risk was worth it as he looked at the newly acquired manuals in his spatial ring. He really did not know if it was Yin Yang who had created the Raiders of All But God, or if the Raiders of All But God had deeply influenced Yin Yang. With these, the residents of 9 Supremes can be considered to have a real foundation and hope to rise again. Although this is only the foundation of a sect at the lowest level, it is still the result of thousands of years of accumulation, and there is no lack of good stuff to strengthen the foundation. On the contrary, the secret manuals of those prestigious sects and the upper-class sects above the clouds are not suitable for their disciples to build their foundation. Because these are the cultivation manuals that truly belong to the grassroots and are most needed. Yin Yang took a deep breath, intending to cultivate the endless divine art to heal himself, but he felt that the breath had almost blown away his internal organs. There was a tearing pain in his stomach, and his vision darkened as he almost fainted again. He tried his best to stay awake, struggling to continue the healing action. The sky slowly darkened. Yin Yang used the last of his energy to choose a concave spot near the mountain wall in this hidden valley and sat down. He closed his eyes and slowly regulated his breathing. Chapter 946. A day and a night had passed. Yin Yang woke up from his long trance and tried to circulate his qi. He felt his meridians flowing smoothly, and as his mystical qi circulated, his internal organs were no longer in pain. It was obvious that his injuries had taken a huge turn for the better. However, upon closer inspection, he realized that there were still many obstructions in his internal organs. They were caused by the accumulation of blood clots. He had cultivated the endless divine art for a day and night, with Emmy's qi of vitality, but it was still the same. It was enough to prove how serious his injuries were. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath. A gust of mystical qi flowed against the current and cleansed his meridians forcefully. He could vaguely hear the rumbling of thunder in his chest and abdomen. Opening his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of extremely thick blood clots and panted heavily. It was only after a long while that he managed to regain his composure. The movement forced the mystical qi through the clots, accompanied by an excruciating pain that felt like it was being cut by a knife. Fortunately, the feeling only lasted for a moment before he felt much better. Yin Yang's breathing calmed down and his nostrils were almost the same as usual. He could not help heaving a sigh of relief. Standing up slowly and stretching his body, he could hear the crackling of his bones. Just as he was about to leave, he was suddenly stunned, a chill running down his spine. A voice suddenly came from behind him. It was thought-provoking and heart-stopping. "Young man, are you leaving just like that?" Yin Yang's heart almost leaped out of his mouth, skipping a beat in that very instant. When he had landed here yesterday, his deific consciousness was already close to being a mess. Relying on the last shred of clarity he had chosen this secluded spot at the bottom of the cliff. Then, he had fallen unconscious and left his fate to fate. However, he clearly remembered that there was no trace of human presence here. How was it that he had rested and recuperated here for a night, feeling that he was alone in this place? How was it that there was actually someone here who had spoken when he had left? Was there not a cliff wall behind him? Yin Yang turned to look at the source of the voice. What he could see was indeed a cliff wall. There was nothing wrong with it. Only the spot where he was sitting was slightly sunken in by about 5 feet. However, it was still a solid cliff wall. "May I know who you are?" Yin Yang asked the mountain wall. The voice heaved a long sigh and did not reply immediately. However, Yin Yang tried his best to listen and discern, confirming that the voice was indeed coming from the stone wall. For a moment, he was even more suspicious. Could it be that this rock had gained sentience? The voice said, "Me? I am a very unlucky person." Yin Yang asked cautiously, "May I ask where you are now and what is your intention of asking a guest to stay at this time?" "I'm right in front of you." The voice sighed softly, "You don't have any strange thoughts?" "I don't have any evil intentions. Last night, I was your protector. You spent the whole night healing yourself, but not even a mosquito passed by. Even though this place is slightly hidden, how could it be like this?" Yin Yang replied, "I see. Thank you for your kindness. However, when high-level cultivators like us cultivate, how can a mosquito dare come close?" The voice chuckled, "Your mystical skill is marvelous and unpredictable. How can I not know that your severe injuries are almost completely healed in a day and night? However, it is also true that your deific consciousness was in a trance last night. I was the one who accompanied you for the whole night. This can't be wrong, can it?" Yin Yang said, "I thank you again for your kindness in protecting me. May I ask what is your intention of asking a guest to stay?" The voice said, "It's fate that we've met. Protecting each other is just a small effort. It's really just a gesture of kindness, nothing more. However, this old and useless one has asked a guest to stay because I want young friend to help me with something. I wonder if young friend will agree to it." Yin Yang replied, "Help? May I ask what kind of help it is?" The voice said leisurely, "If young friend can help me with this old man will owe you a favor. I'll repay you generously in the future. I still don't know if I can be of help to you. It's important to know oneself, but I dare not promise anything." Yin Yang would not agree to it so easily. His tone was tactful, but there was a hint of rejection in it. The bound of universe was connected to heaven's will. Almost every word and action could be witnessed by heaven's will. If he agreed without thinking and this fellow came out to dig a hole for him, would he not become the joke of the ages and become a laughing stock? During this period of time, Yin Yang had been baptized by Little Fatty, Shi Wuchen, and Feng Guohai, the three experts of eloquence. He had long understood that one should not simply speak one's mind, lest one's words bring endless trouble. Besides, he did not even know who this fellow was. Why would he agree to help him the moment he saw him? "What I'm asking of young friend you is just a small effort. I'm sure you can help." The voice sounded rather eager as it said, "I can feel that you have an unusually abundant air of vitality in you. As long as you give me some and help me get out of this predicament, this old man will be eternally grateful for your kindness. I dare not forget it." Yin Yang's eyes darted around as he asked, "Where are you? I can't even see you. Even if you have the intention, you shouldn't do it aimlessly, right?" The person's voice sounded dejected. "I'm ashamed to say this old man is in the belly of the mountain before you." Yin Yang asked, "Does this mean that you have been imprisoned and are not a free and independent being?" Yin Yang's words conveyed two layers of meaning. One was that the other party was not free. Even if he wanted to help, he would have to put in a lot of effort. Secondly, and more importantly, if Yin Yang helped the other party, he would definitely offend the person who imprisoned him. How could he not think about it? The voice did not speak for a long time. It was only after an hour that the person sighed faintly. "Yes. I've been in this mountain for a very long time." "How long is a very long time?" Yin Yang was intrigued. From the length of time this person had been imprisoned, he could roughly determine his cultivation base level. After all, the lower a person's cultivation base was, the shorter the duration of imprisonment would be. He would die within a few years. On the other hand, if the time of imprisonment was long enough, the original cultivation base of the imprisoned person would be more impressive. About 30 to 40 years. The voice sounded uncertain as it said, "I've been imprisoned here and can't see the sun and moon changing. I'm really not sure how many years have passed. I can only say that it's a rough estimate. 30 to 40 years. Yin Yang calculated in his heart. If he were to calculate according to this time, even if this person had a spatial ring and some food to sustain his life, he would not be able to hold on for long. If it was not intentional, why would any cultivator stuff a spatial ring with rations that could last for decades? Chapter 947. If that was the case, to be able to survive for 30 to 40 years without food, the cultivation base of the culprit had to be at least a high-level saint. Or perhaps even a royal saint. Of course, it could be even higher. However, Yin Yang did not wish for the other party's cultivation base to be too high. It was not a good thing if the other party's cultivation base was too high. After all, the higher his cultivation base was, the higher the cultivation base of the person who imprisoned him would be. Saving him would mean going against the person who imprisoned him. How could it be a good thing to have a powerful opponent whose cultivation base was above the level of a royal saint? "You've been imprisoned for so long, you must have an extraordinary cultivation base. Why don't you blast this mountain open and free yourself?" Yin Yang asked, "Could it be that you've been restrained by someone with some special method?" The voice chuckled and said, "That's right. Young friend, you'll know once you come in and take a look." Yin Yang replied, "You must be joking. I can only see the stone wall in front of me. How can I go in?" The voice paused as if calculating and said, "Start from the wall you're facing and use your mystical chi to cut about 80 feet into it, then dig another 120 feet downwards. Then, you'll be able to connect this mountain to the outside world. A considerable part of this mountain is hollow. Yin Yang pondered for a moment, trying to figure out the feasibility of the plan. Dig 80 feet in, then dig another 120 feet downwards. The number was rather accurate. This fellow could actually calculate such a precise number even though he was locked inside? One can't do as he pleases in the martial world. A generous reward from you doesn't seem to be enough for me to act. Yin Yang thought for a moment before speaking. Then what do you want? The voice sounded rather helpless. I'm trapped inside the mountain now. Other than compensating you afterward, I really can't give you a specific reward. I'm the most practical person. Yin Yang said, how about this? I'll save you and you'll be my subordinate. How about that? That voice suddenly paused. After a long, long time, the other party's voice was filled with suppressed anger. Back then, I was imprisoned here because I didn't want to be someone's subordinate, I see. I've overstepped my bounds, but I still stand by my original intention. However, the duration of your service can be discussed. As long as you promise to be my sex guardian for 3 years, I'll fulfill your wish and give you the chi of vitality and even save you from your predicament. What do you think? If you're still unwilling, then think about it yourself. With your status, how many resources do you need? It's enough to make up for your 3 years of service as a protector for a sect. This kind of exchange is also possible. Choose one. The voice said angrily, do you know how much it costs for me to be a protector for a day? Yin Yang said, the higher the better. I really don't mind. The higher your status, the more benefits I can reap. However, I haven't seen you yet. Everything is up to you. The voice was silent for a moment before it said faintly, I can't be your subordinate for 3 years. As for the exchange of resources, I can't do that either. However, if you can save me and regain my freedom, I can promise to do 3 things for you. Kill 3 people and help you raise your cultivation base by a level. I'll also give you resources that can support your cultivation to the royal saint. What do you think? Yin Yang said, nothing much. It's pointless for us to be so calculative. We're like aunties selling vegetables in the market. We're both ace cultivators, why do we have to do this? The voice said disdainfully, ace cultivator? Huh. Yin Yang said, why? Are you not considered an ace cultivator? The voice said, this old man can be considered an ace cultivator, but you, Yin Yang said angrily, what do you mean? No matter how high your cultivation base is, don't you still need me to save you? How dare you look down on me? Do you believe that I won't leave right now? The voice said, this old man doesn't mean that. He then felt that the topic would only become more and more awkward. After a pause, he said, let's talk about the reward for your help. Young friend, what you said just now makes sense. It's indeed beneath my status as an ace cultivator to haggle like this. Yin Yang snorted, knowing that the fellow had given in. He had actually taken the initiative to say, an ace cultivator of my generation. It was obvious that he was trying to appease Yin Yang. Yin Yang said angrily, I hate people who are wishy-washy and calculative the most. Since you're a senior in the martial world, I don't like the slightest bit of delay. The voice said, then tell me something else. This old man will think about it. Yin Yang said, I'll give you 3 choices. Choose from them. Please speak. The first choice is to be my sex guardian for 3 years. This is absolutely impossible. If it were possible, this old man would have agreed to it just now. The voice refused decisively. The second choice. It's the resources that can offset your 3 years of protection for my sect. That's also impossible. Yin Yang said angrily, this won't do, that won't do. What do you want? The voice was rather helpless. Do you know who your father is? Do you know if I'm righteous or a devil? You're actually asking me to be your guardian just like that? Isn't this fellow afraid of getting himself into trouble? This old man isn't someone who speaks without thinking. I'm not willing to act against my conscience. Otherwise, this old man's current state is far from my prime. I only need to agree to your second choice and give you a certain amount of resources afterward. With your insignificant cultivation base and shallow knowledge, can you evaluate it correctly? Even heaven's witness can't pick out this old man's fault. The old man was knowledgeable and righteous, but what he really did not expect was that Yun Yang was really not afraid of getting himself into trouble. No matter who this fellow was, as long as he agreed to be the residence of Nine Supreme's guardian, Yun Yang would dare to use him, even if he was a demon king. The voice was aggrieved as he said in a low voice, "You can talk according to the conditions I mentioned just now. You can even add a little more." Yun Yang said, "Why don't you tell me who you are? Do 3 things for me: kill 3 people, raise my cultivation base by a level, and provide me with resources to advance to Royal Saint." "These conditions are too poor," the voice said. "That's right. You're already blessed by the heavens with these conditions. Young friend, there aren't many people in this bound of universe who can do this. Think about it." "All right. After my consideration, I'll add a little more to what you want as the third choice," Yun Yang said. The voice heaved a sigh of relief. "Very well." Yun Yang said, "Then, do 100 things for me, kill 100 people, help me raise my cultivation base by 10 levels, and provide me with resources to cultivate until I become a supreme saint. That's all." Cough, cough, cough. Chapter 948. That person seemed to have choked and coughed for a long time without recovering. After a long while, he finally managed to squeeze out a sentence. You're so young, where did you learn to be so shameless? You're too despicable." Hearing Yun Yang's words, the man almost choked to death. Killing 100 people for you wasn't difficult, and it wasn't unacceptable. But to do 100 things. How long would that take? I might as well sell myself to you. Even if you work until you die, you might not be able to finish 100 things, right? If I had to choose, I would choose to be your protector for 3 years, okay? It was impossible to finish 100 things in 3 years, right? As for cultivating all the way to Saint Venerable, you really don't hold back. You dare to say anything when your upper lip touches your lower lip. Holy Lord. Do you have the potential to become a holy lord? Do you know how much resources, time, manpower, and material resources are needed for this? Young friend, this old man is sincerely negotiating with you. Can you also show some sincerity? Don't talk about things that are impossible and impossible. All right, if the terms aren't agreeable, we'll continue to negotiate. Ask for as much as you want, and we'll give you as much as we can. Yun Yang was all smiles as he readily accepted the suggestion. Just 3 things, kill 3 people, and get the resources of a saint emperor. This old man's sincerity is more than enough. Fine, fine, fine. I'll take a big step back. 99 things, 99 people, and become holy venerables. This should be fine, right? You can, at most, accomplish 4 things. 4 people, and become the Saint Emperor. I'll take another big step back. 90 things, 90 people, and I'll become a Saint Venerable. I've already taken a big step back, right? I feel wronged. This sincerity. Impossible. I'm a person with a bottom line. Your conditions are simply a random price. It's even more absurd than a sky-high price. It's not like I didn't discuss it. I've already retreated again and again. How is this ridiculous? 5 at most, and 5 people will be Saint Emperors. 85. This should be fine, right? 6. 80. You are shameless. How can you take advantage of someone's precarious position and be so overbearing? You are the shameless one. You're the one who's overbearing. Yin Yang was infuriated. I asked for 100 and you bargained to 3 straight away. How can you bargain like this? I've been giving in step by step. I've already given in by 20%, a whole 20%. But you only increase it by 1% every time. Is this how you do business? You still have the nerve to call me shameless? Who is the shameless one? Who is the insincere one? Hearing his words, the man's brain short-circuited. It seemed like what he said made sense, however, he was immediately enraged. I was the one who made the first offer. That's right. You asked for 3, and I'll raise it to 100. I admit that I'm asking for a sky-high price, and I'll allow you to return the money on the ground. I'm obviously being fair and square, and I'm being honest. You are simply shameless. The two of them began to bargain like aunties in the market. They had already completely forgotten about the cultivation of high-level cultivators and so on that they had just talked about. Towards the end of the negotiation, the man's final offer was to complete 10 tasks and kill 10 people. The condition of helping Yun Yang to ascend a level was rejected by Yun Yang as well. Yun Yang had set his bottom line. Other than completing 10 tasks and killing 10 people, the man had to provide all the resources needed for Yun Yang to ascend to the 3rd level of Royal Saint. The man thought for a long time, deliberated for a long time, and finally gave in, pinching his nose. There's one more thing. Before the 10 tasks are completed, you can't leave. Yun Yang's eyes darted around as he made another request. Do you have so many things that you need me to do? The man asked suspiciously. In the man's opinion, it must be an exceptionally difficult matter that required him to handle it personally. However, it did not seem like there would be many of such matters. What are you talking about? My sect has just been established, there are many things to be done. Isn't this the time when I need manpower? Yin Yang said seriously, I swear to the heavens that I'm not lying to you about this matter. The man was extremely displeased at first. Who was he? Could he do all sorts of trivial things? However, on second thought, although this brat in front of him had the chi of vitality, his cultivation was shallow and his knowledge was probably limited. It might not be a bad thing for him to think like this and order him around like this. With his current level, how many major things could a newly established sect like this have? The so-called 10 tasks and the killing of 10 people would only take a few months at most to complete? A year at most. Therefore, this was actually a good thing for him. There was nothing he could not agree to. With his long lifespan, this amount of time was really nothing. In particular, Yin Yang had also promised that as for the resources needed to cultivate to the level of Royal Saint, he could slowly give them to him when the conditions were right. There was no rush. This way, he would have more room to maneuver. When that time came, when the child truly knew about his identity and level of ability, he would regret not spending time with him and never thought that he would only leave the important matters to him. Just the thought of it made him happy. Therefore, he hesitated for a moment before agreeing to it. He agreed to it without hesitation. Very well. Next, please swear to the heavens to confirm the truth of this matter. Very well. Wait, I still don't know your name. May I ask for your name? This old man. The man was infuriated. You haven't even asked for my name and you've been bargaining with me for so long. This old man is Dong Qitian. I believe a junior like you must have heard of my name. Dong Qitian was very proud when he spoke of his name. He was very conceited. Even after so many years had passed, the name Dong Qitian was destined to not be forgotten by the world. This old man used to be known as Qitian. Do you understand what this means? Dong Qitian was proud of himself when he recalled his awe-inspiring past, waiting for the child to stare in shock and bow to him. I've never heard of you. Yin Yang had indeed never heard of him. What Dong Qitian, Dong Qiti? I've never heard of you. Are you famous? Dong Qitian was speechless when he heard this, his nose almost crooked from anger. Just how ignorant and ill-informed was this kid? How could he not have heard of me, Dong Qitian? Logically speaking, with his current 4th level honor pinnacle standard, he should be qualified to know about some high-level matters. You've really never heard of this old man? Dong Qitian asked in surprise, still in disbelief. I swear to the heavens, I've never heard of you. Yin Yang swore with certainty. Dong Qitian's heart sank, and he was silent for a long time. Could it be that the forgetfulness of the martial world was so severe? Had I, Dong Qitian, been forgotten? Something super embarrassing happened today. Sigh, it's an unlucky year. Daughter-in-law went out early in the morning. I woke up and went to the toilet to solve my problem, but I realized there was no toilet paper left. So I came out to look for some. But before I could find it, the door opened and my wife and mother-in-law came in. Chapter 949. Dong Qitian was a little disappointed. I was a famous figure in this world back in the day. How long has it been since I last appeared in this world and no one even mentions me anymore? The world is fickle and fate makes fools of us, hence, he began to work on the serious matter. The oath was verified by heaven's will. Dong Qitian swore dejectedly. As a clap of thunder rumbled in the sky, the oath was verified by heaven's will. Yin Yang could finally be at ease. Since heaven's will had acknowledged him, it proved that this name was not fake and this matter could be trusted. If that was the case, there was nothing to worry about. Yin Yang rested for a while more to adjust himself to his best condition before he began to work. If he could use the power of earth, he would have been able to complete this task in the most convenient way. Now that his injuries were slightly healed, his mystical qi, deific consciousness, and physical strength were still at their weakest. Therefore, Yin Yang's progress was very slow. Fortunately, Dong Qitian was not in a hurry. He waited patiently without any urging. In the process of waiting for Yin Yang to dig deeper, he even chatted with Yin Yang on and off. What's the situation outside now? It's still the same. What do you mean by that? The mountains are still green, the water is still green, and the martial world is still the same. One can't help himself in the martial world. Didn't I mention it just now? Yin Yang's words were short and concise. Nonsense. Dong Qitian was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. This little bastard's words would not stop until he was dead. You've been here for many years, but I'm the only one you've met? Why didn't anyone save you? There should be many who are tempted by your offer, right? Yin Yang asked. Someone else? Dong Qitian scoffed in disdain. Do you think this is a place where anyone can come and go as they please? What do you mean? I mean, you're the only person who can come here all these years. Dong Qitian was full of grievances. He had planned to do so in the beginning as well. He was waiting for someone to come and he would promise to ask for help so that he could escape as soon as possible. However, after so many years, whenever he sensed someone approaching this place, they would disappear inexplicably or take a detour. In short, before Yin Yang, no one had ever come close to this mountain. Yin Yang could not help being dumbfounded when he heard that. Just this matter alone seemed to be extremely bizarre. Dong Qitian confirmed again and again that there were no restrictions set up around the mountain, nor were there any concealing formations. As for the strange energy, there was nothing at all. But why had no one been able to come over after so many years? No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. While Dong Qitian was thinking about this question, he was also thinking about another one. How long had he been sealed in here? Was it really only a few decades? It seemed more than that. Sometimes, he would force himself to shut off his external divine sense and meditate in seclusion. Every time he meditated, it might last for 10 years or even more. Sometimes, he would even sleep for a long time. There was also the problem of him focusing on studying martial arts. He studied every move in detail, analyzing the minute details and eliminating the flaws. The time he spent in this process was like an hourglass quietly slipping away. Not to mention, there were even more times when he had nothing to do. Come to think of it, the time he had been imprisoned in this place, was it a few decades? Perhaps 10 times more, it might not even be enough. Child, what year is this? Dong Qitian finally asked hesitantly. I'm really not sure about this. Yin Yang said, but it's still the bound of universe's year. Dong Qitian almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Nonsense. Ever since the bound of universe existed in this world, it's always been the bound of universe's calendar. What other calendar could it be if not the bound of universe? I really don't know any more details. Ask someone else when you're free. Yin Yang's words did not displease Dong Qitian because he suddenly felt that Yin Yang seemed to be very close to him. Almost at the very next moment, a huge hole was torn open in the belly of the mountain with a loud bang. It was truly connected to the outside world. Yin Yang walked in amidst the smoke and dust, coming to Dong Qitian's side. So fast. Dong Qitian was rather surprised by the process of breaking through the mountain. In his opinion, the other party's cultivation base was shallow. Even if he had a divine weapon in hand, he should not have been able to dig this far so quickly. Yin Yang smiled. It's probably because there's a section in the middle that's full of soil. Unknowingly, it's much faster. He raised his head to study this Qitian stander, and could not help nodding. Everything else aside, his height alone was worthy of his name. Yin Yang was already considered tall, standing about 7.5 feet tall. He was about 1.82 meters tall. However, this Dong Qitian looked like he was at least 9 feet tall. His body was long and his legs were long, making him a burly man. However, this burly man looked a little miserable at the moment. Just as Dong Qitian had said, the belly of the mountain was hollow, with a space of about 400 to 500 feet. In the center of this space, there was a strange platform. It was not made of gold, jade, or stone, it was faintly emitting a dim glow. There was a pillar on the platform that was only as thick as a person's thigh. Dong Qitian was chained to this pillar. A metal chain pierced through both sides of his shoulder blades, making a circle around his neck. The end of the chain was connected to the top of the pillar. The other chain passed through his left waist and came out from his right waist. It seemed to have wrapped around his spine and then wrapped around the pillar behind him. His feet were spread apart with 2 metal chains tied around his ankles. His hands were not chained to the pillar, but were held horizontally to both sides. There was a metal chain around each of his wrists, the ends of which were attached to the stone walls on both sides. Yin Yang took a closer look. There must be a pillar on each side of the stone walls to ensure that they would not be lost. In general, this Lord Dong Qitian's entire body was in the Tai shape. Other than turning his head slightly to the left and right, turning his face to the side, and wiggling his buttocks, he could not move at all. Yin Yang could not help feeling shocked. He managed to survive for so many years after being chained up like this? It looks like this Dong Qitian is no ordinary character. I'm afraid he must have a powerful background. Of course, the most extraordinary thing that caught Yin Yang's eye was probably Dong Qitian's beard and hair. His jet-black beard trailed all the way to the ground, and his hair was several feet long. At first glance, it was as if he had landed on a pile of weeds that were still growing thickly. Fortunately, his eyes were still shining brightly amidst the beard and hair, revealing his exuberant vitality. How pitiful. Yin Yang sighed. Sigh, Senior Dong, forgive me for being blunt, but I think a monkey looks better than you now. Dong Qitian retorted angrily, why don't you try chaining a monkey like this for a few years? Chapter 950. Dong Qitian was enraged. Suddenly, he channeled his mystical qi and blew it out, blowing away his hair and beard. His face glowed brightly. In just a moment, his face had already become exceptionally refreshed. At the very least, he could clearly see the position of his facial features. Yin Yang marveled as he examined him. The person who imprisoned you is really ingenious, but how did you survive after tying you up like this? How do you eat it? How do you drink it? Dong Qitian sighed resentfully. As long as a person wants to live, they have some tricks up their sleeves. They'll find a way no matter what. As he channeled his chi, the air in the air gradually condensed into water. It was as if there was an invisible teapot in the air, pouring the water into his mouth. In the next moment, hissing sounds came from Dong Tianqi's mouth, traveling far and wide. A moment later, faint swishing sounds could be heard. Yin Yang followed the sound and saw groups of rats, scorpions, centipedes, snakes, at least a dozen types of crawling insects crawling out from the gaps in all directions, following the summons. However, Yin Yang was still puzzled. How could someone who was fully restrained like Dong Tianqi had the time to collect and swallow these insects? A long strand of hair suddenly swam under Dong Qitian's feet, swimming freely among the insects as if it was picking through them. Finally, it picked a colorful venomous snake and tied it up, pulling it to his feet. Then, the rest of the insects scattered as if they were granted amnesty. In the blink of an eye, half of them were gone. Dong Qitian continued with the same method, using a few strands of hair to work together. The strand of hair that was infused with mystical qi easily skinned the venomous snake. To prevent it from retaliating, another strand of hair had been inserted into the snake's body, staying still. The entire snake was cleaned up. After cleaning it up, only the clean snake meat was left floating in the air. Dong Qitian channeled his qi and a ball of mystical qi gushed out of his mouth. This was not surprising, but the mystical qi started burning in the air. It was an extraordinary technique. What was even more amazing was that the few strands of hair that were wrapped around the snake meat were not afraid of the fire. They just held the snake meat and flipped it over and over in the air. After a while, a strong fragrance gradually rose. The snake meat was clearly cooked, and the fragrance assailed the nostrils, making one's mouth water. Dong Qitian used his hair to pull the snake meat to the front of his mouth and bit into it. After a few bites, he even had the time to lift his head and drink a few mouthfuls of water from the air. Purely from the perspective of eating, it was actually very satisfying. Yin Yang could not help but click his tongue in wonder and awe. What a genius! Dong Qitian wore a smug look on his face as he said, "It's still the same old saying. Humans are all forced. At this stage, heaven and earth can only think of ways to save themselves. Apart from that, what other way is there? But it's still passable, don't you think?" Dong Qitian wore an expression that said, "I'm amazing, come and praise me." Of course, Yin Yang would not disappoint him. Amazing. Yin Yang gave him a thumbs up without hesitation. "Elder Dong, you're the best person I've ever met in my life." Dong Qitian guffawed, very pleased with himself. "But I still have something I don't understand." "Please enlighten me, Senior," Yin Yang asked. "What is it?" "Speak away." "It's a very simple matter. You're imprisoned here, but because of your profound cultivation base, you don't lack food or drink. However, with this step of eating and drinking, it's only natural that you have to excrete, right?" Yin Yang asked curiously, "How did you solve this problem?" Dong Qitian's furry face that resembled a chimpanzee blushed at once. The fact that he could still be seen blushing with his current skin tone meant that he was extremely embarrassed. However, this elder Dong was obviously not an ordinary person. He laughed dryly and said, "Young man, you're thinking too much. There are very few impurities in a cultivator's body. Why would there be a need to excrete and whatnot?" What are you looking at?" "What's there to look at?" It was Yin Yang who had lowered his head, staring at the ground between Dong Qitian's legs. But on the ground, there was a very obvious dark brown mark, a whole circle. There was another circle of the same dark brown in front of him. Dong Qitian was infuriated, growling incessantly, What are you looking at?" Don't let your imagination run wild. I'm telling you, King Hell. Are you here to save me or not?" What are you looking at?" Yin Yang hummed meaningfully and said, "I see. Elder is indeed someone who doesn't bother with trifles. This junior admits that I'm not as good as you." Dong Qitian was enraged and roared, What do you know? This is the color of the ground itself. No, I didn't pull it. If it was me, how could there be nothing? Am I right? Do you smell it? You don't, do you? You. Yin Yang said innocently, I didn't say anything. Why are you so anxious, elder? The veins on Dong Qitian's neck bulged as he glared at Yun Yang angrily. You're obviously mocking me. You don't know that my cultivation base is already very, very high. I only need to exert a bit of force and I can send it hundreds of feet away. How could it land so close to you? What are you laughing at? Arg. I'm so angry. In his agitation, Dong Qitian tugged at the chains on his body until they rattled noisily. Sigh, you really don't have to be so agitated, Yun Yang shrugged. I don't know anything. I didn't say anything. Let's talk about how to get you out of here first. The metal chains on you must be extraordinary. Senior, you can't even pull them apart with your profound cultivation base. They must be quite difficult to deal with. Dong Qitian's anger had yet to dissipate. He was embarrassed, feeling a little too ashamed to show his face. Since you're so capable, why don't you just identify what this is? Why are you asking me? He said petulantly. Yin Yang's expression darkened. This old man seemed to have quite a strong ego. My cultivation base is shallow. How can I tell what rare thing this is? I can't do it at all, so naturally, I can't save you. Find someone else and wait for the next capable person. Yin Yang's expression was dark as he made to walk out without another word. Wait. Dong Qitian panicked. How can you leave so quickly? I've made a vow. You've said it yourself. You're the one who made the vow. I didn't. What's wrong with me leaving? Yin Yang shrugged, looking relaxed. Young friend. Dong Qitian's young friend was heart-wrenching and full of meaning. Yin Yang almost laughed out loud. All right. These metal chains, let me see. The more Yin Yang looked, the more his frown deepened. Chapter 951. Yin Yang tried to identify it again and realized that he really did not recognize it. He tried to pull it with his hand, but it did not budge even when he used all his cultivation base. The chain was not thick, but its sturdiness was something he had never seen before in his life. Yin Yang took out a treasured saber that he had plundered from his spatial ring and swung it. With a clang, the chain did not budge at all, but the treasured saber shattered. Let me tell you directly, child. This thing is probably the legendary stellar chain. Dong Qitian was a little downcast when he saw that Yin Yang could not move it even with his saber. This old man has been imprisoned for a long time. Of course, I've studied it, but I still can't figure out the material of this thing. I only know that it's hard to damage. Legend has it that the reason the stars in the sky have always remained in their original positions is because there's a stellar chain that connects all the stars in the sky. It makes them unable to move. That's where the name stellar chain comes from. One can only imagine how sturdy it is. Something that can even bind the stars. How can it be described as extraordinary? The more Dong Qitian spoke, the more dejected he became. The more he felt that Yin Yang could not save him, the more despondent he felt. He was no longer as lively and energetic as before. He could not even break free from this unknown chain that bound him with his heaven-defying cultivation base. He was helpless, and he could not even think of a way to deal with it. What could Yin Yang, a young child with a shallow cultivation base, do? He was simply turning to any doctor in a desperate situation. Although the weapon that Yin Yang had taken out earlier that had been shattered by the recoil was not of an ultimate grade, it was already of an upper-class standard in Dong Qitian's opinion. Thinking about Yin Yang's age, cultivation base, and other aspects, owning such an upper-class treasured saber was already his limit. It seemed like it was just wishful thinking to think more. In other words, the current situation was worse than it could get. He had been hoping for someone to save him, but all he got in return was despair. Why don't Dong Qitian said dejectedly, why don't you forget it? Just give me some vitality qi to recover. Unexpectedly, at this moment, he heard the sound of the wind beside his ear, followed by a dang sound. Dong Tianqi looked towards the source of the sound and saw sparks flying everywhere. When he focused his gaze, he saw Yun Yang holding an oddly shaped yet smooth spirit slash in his hand, slashing at the chain on his shoulder with a loud bang. The dazzling sparks came from the extreme impact between the star chain and the special Spirit Slayer saber. Even with Dong Qitian's eyesight, he could not tell what level the saber was. The only thing he could be sure of was that this saber was a peerless divine blade that he had never seen before. In the end, however, Dong Qitian could clearly see a crack appear on the indestructible unbreakable chain that he was so certain could not be destroyed. Although it was only a shallow mark, it was still cut in. The result made Dong Qitian ecstatic, his hope reigniting. Cutting in proved that this so-called indestructible iron chain could still be cut. What was more joyous and inspiring than hope? It was probably the sudden arrival of another ray of hope after experiencing despair. Dong Qitian's hope came again, but Yun Yang was not feeling well. The blades of heavens will had successfully damaged the astral chain, but the impact of the collision was equally great. It caused a trace of blood to seep from the corner of Yun Yang's mouth. After all, he had yet to recover from his injuries. The forceful attack was undoubtedly a forceful one, it was more or less the same as harming the enemy. Yun Yang retracted the divine edge and went closer to observe it. He was speechless. This chain is unusually tough indeed. With my current cultivation base, even if it's the heart of star, it should be broken in half if I slash it like this. Yet, I've only managed to cut the thickness of a strand of hair on this chain. I'm afraid the effort needed to break this chain must have been too great. It's fine, it's fine. It's fine as long as it can be damaged. As the saying goes, dripping water can wear through a stone. Dong Qitian was almost speechless from the shock. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and recovered quickly, giving Yun Yang the most abundant and urgent confidence at once. Looking at Yun Yang again, especially the peerless saber in Yun Yang's hand, Dong Qitian felt that his worldview had been completely overturned. With his level of cultivation, even if he were to use his mystical skill to melt gold and iron, it would not be a difficult task. He could even condense a blade with his bare hands to cut through iron like it was mud. However, all his methods were useless against this strange iron chain. He was powerless. Dong Qitian had tried countless times throughout the years, so he already knew how tough this chain was. Almost nothing could damage it. It was indestructible, indestructible, and indestructible. The main purpose of bringing Yun Yang in this time was merely to give it a try. More importantly, he hoped for Yun Yang's qi of vitality. As long as there was a certain level of qi of vitality, he would be able to break through his stagnant cultivation base. He would then try to save himself after his cultivation base had broken through. Otherwise, why would he talk about conditions? Even if there were 100 conditions, he would have agreed to them without hesitation. What could be more important than his own freedom? Even at the cost of his own life. Talking about conditions like an old lady in a wet market was just to provoke Yun Yang further, to give Yun Yang more motivation to help. At least, he would not be too hesitant or unwilling when he gave him the qi of vitality in the future. Never would he have thought that Yun Yang not only had the qi of vitality, but he also possessed the spiritual slash that could damage this strange chain. The outcome surprised Dong Qitian, as if he had just woken up from a dream. This was already something that he didn't even dare to hope for. Sigh, I'm still gravely injured after all. This is already my limit. I definitely can't break it open. Yun Yang said, Senior, please give me 2 days of buffer time to recuperate. When my cultivation base has fully recovered, I believe that breaking this chain is no mere thought. Senior's day of freedom is right before your eyes. Dong Qitian's voice was trembling. Great. Great. That's great, this was an unprecedentedly joyous occasion. Forget 2 days, even if it were 2 years. Dong Qitian would still feel that it was 2F*King fast. Too fast. Hope and freedom were right before their eyes. It was only 2 days. Ha ha ha, happiness had come too suddenly, too inexplicably. However, Dong Qitian soon felt that it was slow. From the moment his ecstasy calmed down a little, he immediately felt that it was slow. It was not just days that felt like years, but seconds that felt like years. Chapter 952. Initially, Dong Qitian thought that he would stop Yun Yang even if he wanted to force himself to do so. Even if Yun Yang's treasured saber could break the iron chain, any mystical weapon had its limits, especially a relatively thin saber and sword. If Yun Yang's mystical weapon could not bear the burden before he could break the iron chain, then everything would be over. It would be better to wait for Yun Yang's cultivation base to fully recover and his condition to unleash his full strength. Only then would he be able to succeed in one fell swoop. Of course, there was an even better idea, which was for Dong Qitian to control Yun Yang's treasured saber. Dong Qitian was confident that with his cultivation base and the saber's power, he could easily break the iron chain. Even if his limbs were restrained, he would still be better than Yun Yang in controlling the weapon with qi. However, Dong Qitian knew that it would be difficult for Yun Yang to lend him such a mystical weapon. Moreover, with Dong Qitian's foresight, he had long known that the spirit slash was Yun Yang's natal weapon, nurtured by his natal qi, energy, and skill. If an outsider were to control the weapon with qi rashly, it would be difficult to unleash the weapon's power. Therefore, Dong Qitian dared not disturb Yun Yang at all when he closed his eyes to focus on cultivating and healing. He only stared at Yun Yang, his eyes already filled with anxiety. Why isn't it done yet? Why hasn't he recovered yet? Why is he so slow? As an expert in cultivation, how could he not know that healing was a process? Even if he had the elixirs of the gods, or even the extremely rare qi of vitality, it could only shorten the healing process. It was impossible for him to recover instantly. However, with the light of hope in front of him, no matter how calm his state of mind was, he could not help it. Only 2 days. Oh my God. I'm so excited, so happy, so looking forward to it. Amidst the torment, Dong Qitian looked much more haggard over the past 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot. Hundreds of years of imprisonment had not tortured Dong Qitian to the point of insanity, but this short wait of 2 days had almost caused him to break down. When Yun Yang finally recovered and opened his eyes, he was shocked by what he saw. He cried out involuntarily, You. Senior Dong, what happened to you? Dong Qitian, who was standing in front of her, was no longer as prideful as before. He was almost no longer human, his entire face was black, and his eyes were bloodshot. His gaze was so intense that it looked like it was about to burst into flames as he stared at her like he was going to swallow her whole. Done? If you're done, then hurry up. Yun Yang's voice was hoarse when he heard it. How anxious are you? How impatient are you? Yun Yang was speechless. Dong Qitian said faintly, Why don't we try locking you here for a few years? Yun Yang's expression darkened. He pulled out the divine edge with a swoosh and asked as he searched for a spot, I'm guessing that the person who locked you up back then must be an old acquaintance of yours? Why would you say that? I also know that the two of you should have been good friends, Yun Yang said faintly. Why do you say that again? Yun Yang said coldly as he raised his saber, because if I were him, I'd probably lock you up here as well. Why? Dong Qitian was genuinely confused. Because of that mouth of yours. Yun Yang slashed down with his saber and said, You're too despicable. Since Yun Yang had ascended to the bound of universe, almost everyone he was familiar with had been refreshing Yun Yang's limits. The so-called limits had nothing to do with one's cultivation base, but one's mouth. When he first met little fatty Qian Duo, he had thought that he was a weirdo. Then, it was Shi Wuchen, who was also a prodigy with his mouth, who was not inferior to little fatty. Now, there was this person in front of him, who was probably even better than the first two. Yun Yang, who had always been known for his mouth, was almost about to admit defeat and feel ashamed of his inferiority. Dong Qitian, the person involved, was speechless. Clang, clang, clang. Yun Yang, who had recovered from his injuries and recovered to his peak, launched more than 1,000 consecutive slashes like a thunderstorm. Each slash landed precisely on the same spot. The reverberating sound was extremely uncomfortable for both men's ears. However, this was a necessary process. With such a sturdy iron chain, if the saber were to miss, then the saber would be useless. Only by being accurate and having all the same landing points could one achieve the ultimate effect of water dripping through a stone. Finally, with a soft crack, the first chain was finally broken by Yun Yang. The moment their hopes came true, both men breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Looking over, they saw half of the target's chain fall to the ground. The cut was neat and uniform, a testament to Yun Yang's precision in using his saber. However, the cut on the chain did not feel like it had just been broken. Instead, it was filled with a sense of age, as if it had been broken for hundreds of years. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. This was because in the deific consciousness space, Emmy had suddenly let out a cry. He was actually very interested in this strange chain, and even seemed to be in a hurry. Dong Qitian stared at the cut in a daze, moaning like he was about to cry. It's this metal, no wonder. Yun Yang was panting from exhaustion. Leaning on his saber, he asked, "What metal is this? Do you know the origin of this thing now?" "This is celestial cotton gold, a celestial cotton gold that rarely appears in this world." Dong Qitian exhaled. The legendary celestial cotton gold's main body is a vine called the celestial cotton tree. This tree's vines are the softest and the toughest, but if the celestial cotton tree is melted into a liquid using the heart of stars and thrown in, the celestial cotton tree's vines will transform into an indestructible celestial cotton gold after a short while. It was Yun Yang's first time hearing of such a thing. He said, "Like gold and wood, yet neither." It sounds like a great idea. So it's a vine? Does this mean that Emmy can use it? Yun Yang pondered. It's more than just an idea. This celestial cotton gold is widely recognized as the #1 divine material for refining weapons in the bound of universe. Dong Qitian heaved a long sigh. It's just that I didn't expect someone to spend at least thousands of feet of celestial cotton gold to make a chain and lock me here. How extravagant, he shook his head, speechless. He chuckled bitterly and said, "I'm really flattered by this extravagance." Yun Yang chuckled. "Since you like it so much, why don't I let the remaining chains hang on you? Wouldn't it be a pleasure to continue sharing in the glory?" "No. Please don't." Dong Qitian's expression changed abruptly. His escape was imminent, but he was still shaken to the core. After another 4 hours, Yun Yang finally managed to sever all the celestial cotton wonder gold chains on Dong Qitian. Dong Qitian could not care less about the excruciating pain of the chains being pulled out of his body one by one. His body was still bleeding profusely as he paced back and forth impatiently, cackling as he did so. "Your father has finally regained my freedom. Ha 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 ha." Chapter 953. After a long laugh, Dong Qitian began to sob again. From an influential figure who had dominated the world, he had fallen overnight and become a prisoner for many years. The feeling was indescribable. Without experiencing it personally, no words could describe it. Through his teary eyes, he saw that Yun Yang was still raising his saber and slashing at the stone pillars that imprisoned him, as well as the ones that were buried on both sides of the stone walls. Clang, clang, clang. "Child, what are you doing?" "Cough, the quality of this celestial cotton gold is really good. I'm getting all of them and bringing them back. If I leave them behind, wouldn't I be returning empty-handed from a treasure mountain?" "Ah, this is nothing. You said that the platform below is the spirit sealing platform. Of course, it's good stuff too. Bring it back as well." It's understandable that you want to collect the celestial cotton gold and the spirit sealing platform, but who would dig the pillars like you? Why are you so meticulous? Are you embroidering? Or do you have a lot of time to waste? What are you talking about? The 4 pillars in these 4 stone walls are obviously not ordinary items. Otherwise, they would have been destroyed by you when you were trying to break free from the celestial cotton gold. Since it's good stuff, of course, I have to bring it back. You really don't know how expensive things are until you're in charge. As a sect leader, I'm even poorer now. Yun Yang's eyes were sharp. He could vaguely see a few words carved on a section of the chain made of celestial cotton gold that was hidden in the stone wall at the end of the chain. This was the clue. Of course, he had to bring it back. If they came looking for him, if he was no match for them, he could just give the chain away. Returning it to its rightful owner, I'm only keeping it safe for Senior. Since the item was returned to its rightful owner, could he temporarily calm down and quell his anger? Perhaps he could pull some connections and work together. The calculations in Yun Yang's mind were loud and clear. Of course, he could not let Dong Qitian know of his thoughts. Boom. Dong Qitian watched as Yun Yang kept everything into his space before the entire mountain suddenly collapsed. The pillars were probably the load-bearing objects of this hollow mountain. Amidst the smoke, the 2 of them flashed out. Dong Qitian's body was still drenched in blood as he grumbled, "Aren't you being too hasty? This cave is entirely supported by those few pillars. If all of them were to rush in like this, the formation will melt. How can the cave still exist?" Yin Yang glanced at him and asked in surprise, "Haven't you had enough of this place? Does he still have the intention to stay here? If you really had such intentions, you should have said so earlier." Dong Qitian breathed in the fresh air outside and stared at the bright sky. For a moment, he felt refreshed and lost in thought, so he did not hear what Yun Yang was saying. He stood at the peak of the mountain for a long, long time, facing the sun. Finally, tears streamed down his face, but he suddenly burst into laughter and roared into the sky, Dong Qitian. He was out. He's out. I'm out. Ha 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 ha. Xianhuang World. Dear opponents, I'm coming out. Did you hear that? After a long, long time, he finally regained his composure. He turned abruptly to look at Yun Yang, his gaze deep. Abruptly, he bowed to the ground. "Brother Yun. I'll never forget your kindness in this lifetime." Yin Yang was stunned. He had just waved his hand, but before he could say anything, Dong Qitian had already straightened up and said with a chuckle, "I'll only say these words of gratitude once in this lifetime." Then, Dong Qitian howled into the sky. Amidst the loud howl, Yun Yang saw that the wounds all over his body were slowly healing. Fresh flesh was wriggling and growing at a speed visible to the naked eye, covering the many bloody holes on his body in a short amount of time. Even Yun Yang himself had to sigh in awe at such a speed of recovery. As his wounds healed, Dong Qitian shook his head. More than 90% of his long hair, which was hundreds of feet long, was cut off with a whoosh. The rest was coiled around his head. With a casual swipe of his hand, his beard was cut off at the root. The dust and dirt that covered his body were immediately separated from his body and fell off. Seeing this, Yun Yang thought that Dong Qitian's tidying up should have come to an end. He did not expect to see him exhale, and suddenly, the entire sky was filled with spiritual qi and wind. With a clap of thunder, a heavy downpour came as if it had been summoned. Of course, Yun Yang did not care about the downpour of thunder and lightning. However, the downpour that Dong Qitian had conjured was peculiar. The rain was confined within a radius of a few feet, washing over Dong Qitian's body in a concentrated manner. After a long, long time, a loud sound was heard. The clouds and rain dispersed, and the sky was lit up once more. With a wave of his hand, a soft white robe was draped over Dong Qitian's body. From the inside out, he was covered in snow. There was even a pair of boots made of mystical beast skin on his feet. Be it the clothes or the shoes, they all looked rather ancient. Yun Yang sighed as he watched. It had only been a quarter of an hour, but the person before him had transformed from a battered and severely injured prisoner into a well-built middle-aged man with a graceful bearing. Now that he looked at Dong Qitian again, he was tall and slender, about a head and a half taller than him. His long legs stood straight on the ground, as if he was going to propel his muscular body into the starry sky. His brows were thick, and his eyes were deep. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and there was a faint aura of a ruler descending upon the mortal realm in his movements. Looks like this person was most likely a rare hero before he was imprisoned. Yin Yang thought to himself. Dong Qitian's loud howl had already traveled far away. Silhouettes could be seen moving from afar, flying towards them. It was obvious that they were here to see who had caused such a commotion. Looking at their attire, Yin Yang guessed that they were from Kangwu Union. Dong Qitian stood on the peak with his arms behind his back. His white robe fluttered as he stared coldly at the four silhouettes flying towards him. As the four of them approached, their speed became slower and slower. They were probably hesitating if they should really come closer, so they finally stopped. After all, the cultivation base of the person who had let out the howl was too terrifying. Just as they were hesitating if they should retreat, there was a sudden swoosh. All the trees within 1,000 feet between the four of them, Dong Qitian and Yun Yang, had been uprooted and floated away in unison. At this point, there was no longer anything that could obstruct their vision. Both sides could see each other clearly from afar. It was obvious that the person on the other side was annoyed that the forest was blocking their vision. With a wave of his hand, he had gotten rid of everything like a knife. I want to see you face to face. You want to hide? Why don't you try? The four people on the other side were dumbfounded as if they had been struck by lightning. The trees, forests, and even the hills that they had relied on to conceal themselves had all disappeared in an instant. There was no time to react at all. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.